Good evening. How is everyone doing this fine, lovely day? Did y'all have a good Friday? Did y'all have a fun week? Let me know. Let me know. I am super excited because tonight, hopefully, finally, potentially, I might have gotten the subtitles working. Yay! The open captions. I don't know. We'll have to see. But boy, oh boy, it should be exciting. At least that would be my hope, anyways. But do let me know how y'all doing. How's it going? How we loving life? Are we loving life? I sure hope so. I sure hope so. I have been so excited all day for outdoor jade. I don't have any gems or keys to get outdoor jade. But I'm excited that he's here, and I even have my juniper berry tea to celebrate the forager. Hello, welcome in, welcome in. All right, I have a very important question for y'all. Can you see the little subtitles on the screen? Are they working properly? Are they there? Can you see them? I sure hope so. I sure hope so. Ooh, stressful week? Yeah. I hope you have a relaxing weekend too. My week was very busy. I did not get a lot done that I wanted to get done. But okay, good. I'm so glad that they're working now. I'm so glad that they're there. Fantastic. Okay, so we're gonna have open captions tonight as well. And they're actually going to work. How well they're going to work, I cannot say. But they're there. So hopefully that helps. But hey, welcome in, welcome in. Hello, hello, hello. Are y'all excited for our lovely story? Now, when we last left off, it was when we broke the chandelier. We had gotten to this mysterious world. We had learned about the Great Seven. We got in a fight with Ace, then tried to get Ace to do his job. Which he did not want to do. Got Deuce involved, and now, because of all that, and we went to the cafeteria, smashed the chandelier, begged Crowley not to expel us, and now we're gonna see how we can not get expelled. That is that is our purpose. That is our quest. That is what we shall be doing tonight. Oh man, so do y'all just want to jump into it or do you want to chat a little bit more? What are we feeling like? What do we want to do? What do we want to do? Oh, the land of Bogo. Interesting. It is working! Isn't that exciting? Isn't it so exciting? It's a different thing. I figured out how to do this. It is the one productive thing that I did get done this week outside of work, was figure out how to get these subtitles. Or these captions, whatever they're supposed to be called. Captions, I think. Oh, my. But yeah. Alright, well. Pose. I don't even know if I have anything left to chit-chat about. My brain has been melted. So I feel like we might as well get started, no? Before I go completely insane. Alright. Let me get the Heartslabyul music up. Oh, pardon me. Pardon. Do. And then Heartslabyul, because we're in the book of Heartslabyul. Alrighty. Starting back off in chapter 6. When Yuya opened his eyes, he was standing in a quiet wood, enveloped in the light spilling out from the dark mirror. How did this turn to such a giant hassle? Grim shouted, making the leaves on the trees around him flutter. He'd been complaining ever since he'd woken up, and Yuya had explained the situation to him. Look, Weasel, Ace snapped. This is all your fault. Actually, I think it's your fault, Ace, Deuce interjected. You were the one who ran away to start with. Sure, Ace is no saint here, Grim agreed. But you threw him at me. You're on the books too, Deuce. That's right. I kind of forgot that Deuce was the one that, that threw Ace at the chandelier. I don't know why I always forget that. Anyway, the evening sun that poured into the woods was a fiery red, carving out deep shadows around the trees that were more threatening than simple darkness. The lazy branches beckoned lazily, urging them farther into the forest. Yuya could sense the presence of birds and other small creatures, but they were all hiding in silence, perhaps afraid of this group of interlopers. The disturbing quiet in the eyes of invisible animals set Yuya on edge, not to mention that Grim, Deuce, and Ace had not stopped arguing once since they had left the cafeteria, and just being near them was exhausting. Oh, and I have a cat on my desk. Excuse me for one moment. Kitty, no. No. There you go. Okay. I guess I was ignoring him. He decided to jump up. Now hopefully he will settle and not be curious about everything on the desk. Alrighty. Where was I? Where am I? Ah, exhausting. That's where I was. Ah, there's a cottage over there, he cried, pointing to a structure by the side of the river. Maybe someone's home. They might know something about the mage stones. He ran toward the small house as if fleeing his companions, but when he knocked on the door, no one answered. When he looked at the building more closely, he saw the roof and walls were covered in moss and the windows overrun with vines. He gave the wooden door a gentle push and it opened easily. Huh, so it's empty, Ace asked, peering in from behind him. This place is a total wreck. Seriously, I doubt anyone lives here. The inside of the house was dark and in poor shape indeed. The room was thick with spider webs, and it was clear no one had stepped inside for quite some time. As he examined the furniture, Yuya got the feeling that something was off somehow. The table was very small, as were the chairs lying on their sides on the floor. 7 in total, all in the same style. He wondered if they had been made for children and squinted to get a better look at the place. There was still a pot on the hearth, large enough to feed more than a few people. The shelves were cluttered with a random assortment of dishes and cutlery. The kitchen must have been bustling, full of life, back when people still lived here. Yuya was staring at the pot, now white with dust, and letting his thoughts wander into the cottage's former residence, when he suddenly heard Deuce's voice off in the distance. Hey, I found the entrance to the mine. Yuya walked over to Deuce, who was standing in front of a large hole in the face of the mountain. A narrow passage led into the rock, almost like it was being drawn into the hole, and it was so dark he could only see a few meters ahead. If we're gonna find the mage stone, it'll be in there. Ace pulled out the flashlights he'd brought along for this reason and handed one each to Deuce and Yuya. With nothing but these small circles of light to guide them, the group started into the mine. The tunnel was wider than Yuya had imagined, and the air was chilly. He could hear water trickling somewhere. It's all damp and clammy and dark and scary, Grim muttered. Kinda like Ramshackle Dorm. Ramshackle Dorm? Ace frowned, confused. Oh, that's the building Crowley's letting us stay in, Yuya said hesitantly. He felt nervous talking to Ace for some reason. Deuce looked back at them from where he was walking up ahead, a puzzled expression on his face. Dorm? You're living on campus too? And like, what are you anyway? Ace demanded. Oh, is he talking to Grim, maybe? I. What are you? That's giving the same energy as the kazoo kid being like, wait a minute. Who are you? And like, what are you anyway? Ace demanded. Where'd you come from? Well, he was talking to us. Yuya explained his odd situation as they advanced down the rocky path, heels clacking. Another world? Ace and Deuce exclaimed in unison when Yuya was finished. I didn't even know there were other worlds, Ace said, eyebrows high on his forehead. Me neither, Deuce agreed. First I've heard of it. Okay then, what if we don't find a mage stone and you get chased off campus? What then? Ace turned his flashlight on Yuya, questioning. Yuya squinted at the light. All he could offer in response was a feeble smile. What? Ace grimaced. If I'd known all that, I'd have... Shh! Deuce interrupted sharply. Did you hear that? At first, they thought it was the sound of the wind, the rumble of the air as it slipped between the rocks and scraped up against them, but they could hear something else mixed in with it. Is it getting louder? Deuce whispered. It was a groan. Something was groaning, which is not what you want to find in the mine. Just as Yuya came to this realization, he saw a dim light ahead, where the corridor branched off. This disturbing purple light flickered and grew larger, approaching Yuya and the others. He heard liquid splashing, like droplets landing wetly on cold rock. Plish, plish, more water noises. The sound went on and on, planting seeds of fear in his heart. Hey, guys, Grim said nervously. What is that? The source of the splashing revealed itself slowly, and Yuya stared, stunned. He had no idea what he was even looking at. No give. An enormous mass of dirt shuddered. It held a pickaxe and a lantern. It had hands and a body, but no face. In place of a head, it had a floating, spherical ink bottle. The black liquid inside oozed like coal tar and dripped slowly, drop after drop, out from a crack in the glass. The mass of dirt groaned like it was in pain. Stone. While Yuya and his comrades gaped, the mass of dirt brandished its pickaxe. Stones are mine! Ah! Deuce dropped and rolled away to dodge the sharp end of the pickaxe as the blade sliced into the metal tracks at his feet like they were soft butter. What in the... He cried out, still flat on his backside. Seriously? What is that? A dirt monster? The pickaxe whooshed through the air towards Yuya, and he glued himself to the rock face of the tunnel wall, just barely avoiding the blow. How would I know? He cried wildly. I've never seen anything like that. No one told me about a no dirt monster, Grim shrieked as he jumped to one side with Ace. He launched a fireball from his mouth, but it was swallowed up by the black fluid and snuffled out. I can't believe my magic isn't working. Get back, you giant dodo. Ace blasted the creature with his wind magic, but like Grim's flames, it was quietly absorbed. Get out! Get out! The monster roared. While it was focused on Grim and Ace, Deuce hurriedly got to his feet. He readjusted his grip on his flashlight, ready to start running in the opposite direction from the monster, and then abruptly called out, "Ah, a mage stone!" Yuya followed Deuce's gaze and saw a glint of something catching the light farther down the tunnel. A glittering gem, half buried in the stone, so big that he could sense from just a glance that it was special. Even from afar, it was so beautiful that he stopped and stared in awe. almost forgetting where he was. Hey, you dolt! Ace roared angrily. Focus, giant dirt monster! Deuce turned. Excuse me. Deuce turned and braced himself for a fight. He was glaring at the magical pen he held in both hands, and his legs began to move as he muttered. His lips began to move as he muttered something. Ace shot him a look as if to say they did not have the time for him. Cat, please. Ace shot him a look as if to say they did not have the time for him to do whatever it was he was doing and cast his wind magic at the monster once more. The pickaxe easily knocked the spell aside, turning it into a whirlwind that grazed the end of Deuce's hair. When he danced out of the way of the mini tornado, a flash flood gushed out in all directions from the tip of his magical pen. Yikes! Ace cried, leaping out of harm's way. Deuce gritted his teeth in vexation. Be careful, you jerk! Right back at ya, Ace snarled. Can't you control that thing? The air between them crackled, an argument just waiting to erupt again. Ace, Deuce, come on, Yuya shouted. Grim was already sprinting out of the tunnel ahead of them. The three boys desperately chased after his furry, rounded back. The moans of the monster and the chill of the air closed in around them. It's gonna get us, Grim wailed. Yuya gasped for air. His chest hurt. His throat was sticky with thirst. Every breath was a fight. He toppled forward, half falling into each step, but he somehow kept himself upright and concentrated on putting one foot in front of the other as quickly as he could. He wasn't the only one. They were all panting and wheezing and groaning. He wouldn't have been surprised if one of them had simply collapsed. Stones are mine! A roar ripped through the air, almost deafening them. Gripes! Deuce waved his magical pen wildly. I summon thee, Cauldron! A heavy thud echoed in the tunnel. Yuya looked back over his shoulder. The same massive pot that had previously fallen from the sky to crush Ace was now blocking the narrow, curving passage. Arrgh! Came a ferocious roar from the other side of the barrier. The monster howled in fury, but before long they heard a slithering, dragging sound, and they could no longer sense the creature's presence. Yuya stared at the cauldron and dropped to his knees as if in prayer. While Grim, Deuce, and Ace flopped back onto the ground, their chests heaving. They were all too winded to speak for a while. Finally, Ace raised his hoarse voice to make himself heard over all the panting. That monster was a total gross out. What was it? No idea, Deuce shook his head weakly. It was no normal ghost, that's for sure. Grim managed a hint of a nod. Ghosts aren't black, and they definitely ain't as scary as whatever that was. The ghost who'd come out of the walls at Yuya yesterday had been scary, true, but he figured that was more due to the surprise of encountering the ghosts for the first time rather than there being anything inherently terrifying about them. Sure, their love of pranks was a bit of an issue, but after speaking with them in the light of day, he'd felt almost fond of the funny little guys. The monster in the tunnel, though, that thing inspired real terror in him. His arms were still covered in goosebumps, and he rubbed them with a shudder. He wondered how he had known that the headless creature was a threat to his life the second he saw it. Chills had run up his spine as he felt a powerful instinctive loathing of the black liquid dripping from the massive bulk. The way it looked, that voice, just remembering them made the contents of his stomach churn. Can't have enough lives going up against a thing like that. Ace got to his feet and glanced at the cauldron up ahead. He seemed to consider something. He looked back. The entrance to the mine wasn't too far off. They'd come a distance in their flight from the monster. He shook his head. "Let's just give up and go home," he said decisively, as though he'd never been sure of anything in his life. "We can snag a mage stone someplace where there's not a monster bent on murdering us. There was that fork in the road right after we came in, yeah? We still got other places to look." "Huh?" Deuce looked up at him. "How can you give up when the stone is right there? You all saw it. It was huge. We are 100% unexpelled if we bring that mage stone to the head mage. We have to go back and get it." "No, no, no." Ace shook his head firmly back and forth. "That's an absolutely idiotic move. Going back in there with that thing?" "It's not an idiotic mood," Deuce protested vehemently. "We've only got 2 hours until it's tomorrow. We don't have time to go look for another." "Listen, you," Ace let out a long sigh. "You're putting on a real show here, but can you actually take that monster out? Or is this like the chandelier, and you're just gonna charge in there with absolutely no plan and drag the rest of us down with you? You're a real pain in the butt, you know. If we're talking death, just letting time run out, I'll always pick time." "Chicken," Deuce said coldly. "What?" Ace glared at him. Deuce drew himself up and returned the glare, pulling his chin in. His voice was low and threatening as he stared in on the other boy. "You're swagger around like you're the king of the hill, but you're all talk, no action. If you weren't willing to put your life on the line, you should have never come here in the first place. If you're not willing to put your life on the line, then you shouldn't promise that right from the start. Why don't you just go back to your coop, you big chicken?" I don't want to be chased out of school either," Grim cried, as if emboldened by Deuce's spirit. Ace winced ever so slightly and then smiled coldly, as if to say there was no way he was going to back down now. "Okay then, you two go on ahead with your sad little baby magic and fight the big bad monster. I'd like to see you try. Neither of you's even half the mage I am." "Huh?" Deuce cried. "Oh, it's on. Go ahead and say that again." "How dare you call my magic sad?" Grim snarled. Yuya could only stand there, rooted to the spot, while they yelled and argued around him. "It's your fault. To start with you." Angry roars filled the air, battering both of Yuya's nerves and his ears. He hung his head and saw that his clenched fists were trembling. His heart was pounding as if it was going to pull itself apart, and he'd never been so out of breath in his life. He'd been hot before, and yet now he was so cold he could hardly stand it. The tension was a living creature, snaking around him and holding him fast. He was not good with fighting. He hated it. He lived his whole life expressly avoiding a hint of anything that might have been a fight. And yet, from the moment he arrived in this place the day before, it had been a constant stream of battles. The more he tried to avoid them, the worse everything got. Challenges, threats, arguments, violence. Bad things just kept happening. Was it his fault for not being able to stop it? Would he be in a different position now if he had been able to say something at some moment leading up to this one? Would he have been able to avoid this horrible quarreling? The commotion was so loud that covering his ears would do nothing, and before he knew it, he was shrieking. "Stop fighting!" All shouting ceased immediately. His companions had apparently been stunned into silence by the fact that Yuya was even capable of raising his voice. "You scared me!" Grim was frozen in place, all the hair on his body standing on end. Surprise also colored the faces of Ace and Deuce, but their expressions quickly grew surly again. "Stop fighting? Okay, buddy." Ace snorted in laughter. Ha! Now you're Mr. Goody Two-Shoes. Listen up. You know who's gonna be in the most trouble if we don't get us a mage stone? You, that's who. You got nowhere else to go, right? So how can you stand there and be all fighting's bad? Let's all hold hands and be besties. You gotta be kidding me. He jerked his chin up as if to express his disgust at the idea with his whole body. Whatever Yuya said in response, Ace would no doubt sneer and laugh and make fun of him twice as badly. Normally, he would have turned tail and run, but all the fighting had made him painfully aware that whatever he had been doing so far wasn't working, and the words came to him naturally. That's not what I mean, he insisted. You can't actually be saying we should give up. Deuce scratched his head in annoyance. Listen, to tell you the truth, I am scared too, but we have to have that mage stone, and I'll do whatever it takes to get it. I've got 2 arms. I can spare one of them. You do that, Deucey, you do that. And I'm saying I don't want anything to do with your desperate little mission, Ace told him. If you hadn't gotten in the way, I would have had that monster, Deuce yelled. As if Ace rolled his eyes. The only magic you've got any real control over is that stupid cauldron. And you weren't even aiming right back there. Well, how could I? Deuce retorted. Anyone'd need a minute or 2 in a situation like that. And they were off again. They snarled and snarked and got absolutely nowhere. As the 2 of them yelled about whose magic had held whom back and how, Yuya remembered what the head mage had said about magic not being a panacea. As an outsider, magic seemed like a dream to him, but it was a lot harder to control than he thought. It sounded like Juice was saying that you needed to be able to concentrate to make the magic do what you wanted. I'm sure that I'll be able to stay calm and cast the spell if we go back in there. Deuce's voice had an empty edge to it, and his face looked pained, as if he knew only too well that there was no way he'd be able to stay calm with an enormous angry monster charging at him. Ace is right, Yuya said, finally. We'll never dig out the mage stone like this. I think we'll only be beaten back if we try and go head to head with the monster. What should we do then? Grim asked. What? Yuya paused to think. We could work together. Work together? Ace made a gagging face. No thanks. Next, you're gonna make us hold hands and sing a song or something. I am not. Then what? Ace demanded. You didn't even do anything in there. You just ran away. So how exactly do you think you can work together with me? He recalled that the ghosts had told him about the students at Nightraven College, people who prided themselves on their self-reliance, who excelled at magic. He was the most useless person there, the only one without any magical ability, and yet he was propositioning that he could be of some use to them. Now that he thought about it, why had Grimm actually listened to him when they were facing off against the ghosts? Kee! An odd sound, one that would never be found in nature, suddenly filled their ears. It was high-pitched and sounded tragic, like someone weeping. An eerie light floated in the tunnel, and the faceless bulk appeared in the darkness once more. The heavy pickaxe dragged behind it, digging into the earth. The hard metal cut away at the rock, producing the ear-splitting sound. Mine. My stone. Mine. The creature groaned. Alone in front of the monster, Yuya braced himself. He took a deep breath and shouted at the top of his lungs, "The stone is mine!" And then he whirled around and ran, clutching his flashlight. Get out! The monster lumbered heavily after him, moving bizarrely and seemingly at random, throwing its limbs about as if to set them free of its body. It seemed utterly impossible that this could have been the movement of something rational. Slipping through the large hands flailing around, Yuya ran with everything he had. He stumbled over a railroad tie that had long ago fulfilled its role of supporting the tracks, and now was lying along the dark tunnel path. He fell. Ee! He shrieked as something damp grabbed his ankle. His leg was yanked back roughly, firmly, and his white socks had turned black. At first, he could see a clearly defined handprint, but then the outline bled and spread outward, like a spot of ink leaking inside a pencil case. Yuya pressed his hands to the ground and tried to scramble backward as the monster steadily closed the distance between them. The pickaxe was slowly lifted high into the air. "Stone's mine!" the creature roared. "I summon thee, Cauldron!" rang Deuce's voice. A metallic clanging filled the tunnel. Ever so tentatively, Yuya opened his eyes. The monster had been crushed under the cauldron and was kicking and struggling against the ground. "Yes! Got him!" Deuce cried from behind a rock a few steps away from Yuya. He thrust a clenched fist into the air. "The rest is up to you." At his signal, Ace and Grim leapt out from their separate hiding places. Yuya stepped back as Ace brandished his magical pen, and Grim puffed out his stomach. Small sparks crackled in the air around them. "You bet! I got this! One extra large gust of wind coming up," Ace shouted, "with a side of Grim's blazing hot fire." "Yeah," Grim called. When Ace fired a sharp blast of wind, Grim set his flames, riding on top of the powerful breeze. The air strengthened the pale flames, and the two combined, transforming into a massive, spinning vortex of flames that rolled and swirled straight for the monster, swallowing its massive bulk. "Rawr!" A scream echoed through the area. The heavy cauldron clattered and shook. Beyond it, Yuya could hear Deuce shouting, "I got it! I got the Mage Stone!" The hand he held up clutched a bright stone that dazzled the eye as it caught the light of the flames. "Yeah, let's skedaddle then," Ace shouted, and they all turned and raced toward the exit. Yuya started laughing in relief until he heard a heavy cahood behind him in the tunnel. "Rawr, rawr, rawr!" The ground beneath their feet and the tunnel around them juddered and jolted. The roaring turned their blood to ice, and they reflexively stopped moving. "You've got to be kidding me," Deuce murmured. The monster howled, drowning out all other sounds, and the rocks around them bounced up into the air. Zoosh! Something stretched out towards them from the darkness, a hand dripping with black fluid. A hideously burned cap crumbled and fell to the ground. "Stone!" A cracked head appeared before him, and Yuya gaped. "Stone! Give back!" "Watch out!" Bwan! Oh, the subtitle stopped. Why did you stop? Hold on. What happened? Can we come back? Are we back now? Hello? Can y'all still see them or no? Oh man. They were working so nicely for so long. Okay. Yeah. All right. Is that going to work now? Why? No! Man. Oh, it was working so nicely. Oh, there it goes. Okay. I might just have to refresh it every now and again. So just let me know. Let me know if it goes away again. Okay, alright, where were we? Maybe, hopefully I get more than 30 minutes out of it this time. You gotta be kidding me, Deuce murmured. Yes, the book does have the artwork in it. It does. They're quite fun. I can describe them when I get to them, but it does, to answer your question. Alright, where was it? Okay, yeah. You've gotta be kidding me, Deuce murmured. The monster howled, drowning out all other sounds, and the rocks around them bounced up into the air. Zwoosh! Oh, wait, yes, okay. Something stretched out toward them from the darkness, a hand dripping with black fluid. A hideously burned cap crumbled and fell to the ground. Stone! A cracked head appeared before him, and Yuya gaped. Stone! Give back! Watch out! One! Something wrapped around him, and he was shoved hard to one side. Yuya stumbled forward, and there was a loud crash. When he looked back, a lantern was lying in pieces on the ground where he'd been standing half a second earlier. If he hadn't been knocked aside, the lantern would have smashed into him, and he wouldn't have come out of that collision unscathed. Eye on the prize, man! Ace patted his shoulder. It was only then that Yuya realized Ace had saved him with his wind magic. This guy seriously can't take a hint, Grim cried, as he sent balls of fire shooting towards the monster alongside Ace's bursts of wind. Even enveloped in flames, their enemy continued to stagger forward, painfully persistent. Its sights were set squarely on Deuce and the mage stone in his hand. Gotta stop it. Deuce looked around uncertain. Rope? No. A cage? But anything's fine, Yuya shouted. Anything. Deuce glared at the monster as if shaking off his indecision. I summon the cauldron! The magical pen he held high in the air flashed sharply. And cauldron! More cauldron! And now the finishing blow? Cauldron! Ah! Yuya winced at the succession of ear-splitting metallic crashes until he heard a snapping sound like breaking glass. He stared at the pile of large cauldrons and watched as a black puddle leaked out slowly from beneath them. When they headed out of the mine this time, nothing stopped them. The moon offered a gentle welcome as they exited the tunnel. The pale light spilling between the leaves of the trees dazzled their eyes, and they grew weak with relief, letting their guard down at last, sinking into the ground on wobbly knees. The grassy earth was soft, and the air that entered their lungs no longer held the clammy chill of the mine, but was filled with the refreshing, verdant scent of the trees. Hey, Ace said, lying on his back, chest heaving. There's this thing that's been bothering me. Yeah? What? Deuce asked, too exhausted to even turn his head towards Ace. How come you can only make that cauldron, man? I mean, there's gotta be other stuff you could summon, yeah? There was a brief silence. When Deuce finally answered, there was a sulky edge to his voice. It's the only thing that pops into my head when I'm all worked up in the moment. Like, you think sorcerer, you might think cauldron. You know? Oh, precious Deuce. Precious, precious Deuce. Okay, that is the most one-track of all one-track minds, Ace muttered, exasperated. And he let out a short, seemingly accidental bark of laugh. Ha! This was followed by another, and another, until he was howling with laughter. Perhaps out of their own giddy relief, Grim and Deuce joined in, and eventually, Yuya, too, was rolling around giggling. I can't even believe it. Yeah, and it's all thanks to you for getting us on track. I mean, all I did was run away, Yuya blushed. You guys did all the work. The plan Yuya had proposed was that they use him as bait. He had thought harder about the time he and Grim had beaten back the ghosts and how they'd run around Ramshackle Dorm together. He remembered the satisfied smile on Grim's face as Yuya held him. If he'd remained standing on the sidelines merely watching, he was sure Grim never would have agreed to work with him. It was only after Yuya threw himself into the fight that Grim had gotten on board with him. This time, he had decided he would draw the monster's attention while the others got into place and prepared. That way, Deuce could focus and make sure his magic hit its target, and he figured Ace and Grim could be pretty strong if they combined their powers. When he outlined his idea, the other three had been speechless, so he'd felt a little twinge of satisfaction. Yuya was a mere human being, but he had no special powers. Grim, Ace, and Deuce were grand wizards in comparison, which is why he'd only been able to trust them to handle the monster. He'd been terrified to stand in the tunnel alone, but he'd push forward with his belief that the others would come through for him somehow. So you see, it's all thanks to you guys, he said, and Deuce shook his head. You're the one who came up with the plan, Deuce said. And I mean, that was seriously a wild idea, using yourself as bait? But you totally pulled it off, dude. You've got serious guts. Yuya found it odd how Deuce's speech would get a little brash every so often, but he grinned at the enthusiasm behind the words. Deuce's maybe totally right there, Ace readily agreed. That was a pretty good plan. Even the furball's sad little magic's not so sad with my help. That's how you do it. Yuya expected complaints like, it's not sad or I'm not a furball, but Grim didn't so much as make a peep. Huh? He sat up. Grim? What are you doing? He was digging through the grass near the entrance of the tunnel. Something smells amazing. He sniffed around, nose wriggling, and his claws came up against something. Found it. This is it. He held up a black object about as large as a gumball. It rolled around in his palm and looked to be as hard as a rock. They all peered at it. And on the next page is a lovely little drawing of Ace, Deuce, and Grim lying in the grass, all laughing uncontrollably. And Grim, I think, is even crying a little. But yes, unfortunately, Grim picked up a black stone. Hey, wait, Deuce frowned. Is that a mage stone too? Nah, Ace shook his head. I mean, I've never heard of a mage stone black as coal. Yuya looked over at the large shining mage stone in Deuce's hand. The new stone was dull in comparison. Rather than reflecting the light of the moon, it seemed to suck in every last drop. The monster was black too, Ace noted. Maybe it's part of the wreckage. It's obviously not the same as the other stones here. Now that you mention it, Yuya said, I might have kicked something while we were running away. Grim's tail swished from side to side. Ha! He stared enraptured at the black stone and began to tremble uncontrollably. I can't, he cried at last. I gotta go for it. Time to chow down. Huh? The three boys gaped as the black stone disappeared into his open mouth. Grim crunched away on this lump of unknown origin, found by the side of the road, and then suddenly pressed his hands to his mouth as his eyes grew wide. Meow! Are you okay? Yuya cried worriedly. Yummy! Grim sprang up into the air, rich in flavor and full-bodied, like sweet, fragrant flowers bursting into bloom on my tongue, a whole field of them right in my mouth. He licked his chops deliciously and did a little skipping dance. He seemed to truly relish the blackstone. You picked that up off the ground and ate it. Yuya was exasperated. Gross. Ace made a face beside him. Monsters must have really weird tastes. Don't you dare eat this by accident. Deuce tightened his grip on the precious mage stone, which he needed 2 hands to hold. Yuya looked at the stone and nodded. Okay, let's go. We gotta give that thing to the head mage. Oh my, my, my. Grimmy, grim, grim, grim. The stone that started it all. But now, we move on to Chapter 7. Pardon? You're telling me you actually went to the enchanted mine in search of a mage stone? Crowley's stunned cry greeted them when they barged into the head mage's office. I assumed you'd soon give up and return. Deuce rolled his eyes at this unexpected reaction. It wasn't like that was an option. I said I'd do anything. Indeed you did, but... Crowley shrugged. Never in my wildest imaginings did I think you would actually return with a mage stone. I'd heard that the mine was picked clean long ago, so I went ahead with preparing your expulsion documents. Are you serious? Grim shook with anger, as he should. Crowley, technically, just sent us all on a wild goose chase where we almost got killed. Not that Crowley knows that, but... Not a good look, Birdman, not a good look. While we were fighting that huge monster, you were expelling us? Monster? Crowley blinked at him. Yeah, Ace leaned forward towards Crowley. We got into a real tangle with the super strong, totally nasty monster. He told the head mage about what they had encountered in the tunnel. The shape of it, the voice, the horror. Oh no, they did it again! Ah! Okay. Refresh the page. Start. Are you gonna work? Great, thank you. Okay. Are you serious? Grim shook with anger. While we were fighting that huge monster, you were expelling us? Monster? Crowley blinked at him. Yeah. Ace leaned forward towards Crowley. We got into a real tangle with this super strong, totally nasty monster. They told the head mage about what they had encountered in the tunnel, the shape of it, the voice, the horror. When they were done explaining how they had finally overcome it, Crowley covered his face with his hands. Oh, he moaned. Oh. What's the matter? Yuya asked timidly. Ah! Crowley's cry grew louder and morphed into a howl. What is this guy's deal? Grim arched an eyebrow at the head mage. Bursting into tears in public? It can't be! Crowley sniffled and pressed his hands to his mask. To think that the victorious day would come when the students of Night Raven College joined hands to defeat a common foe. I did not hold that guy's hand, Deuce exclaimed. Oh, and like I would hold yours? Okay, I'm out. That's too creepy. Ace shot back. Deuce and Ace pointed at each other and scowled, lines cutting deep into their faces. But perhaps seeing even in this, they were in sync. Crowley nodded happily and said, I am extremely grateful in this moment. Yuya craned his head to one side and Crowley clasped his shoulders. My doubts are allied, he said. You have a gift. A gift? Yuya's eyes grew wide. Me? What? You possess the talents of a beast tamer, the head mage declared. A beast tamer? Yuya was baffled. What even is that? Crowley grinned at him brightly. Ever since you regaled me with the tale of how you vanquished the ghosts with Grim, I have wondered if that might not be the case. Ace and Deuce ignored the big reveal and continued to quarrel. Crowley watched this out of the corner of his eye as he leaned forward and began to speak. The truth is, my students have all been selected by the Dark Mirror for their exceptional talent and potential as future mages. Yes, Yuya nodded. You told me that before. But at the same time, great talent begets great egos, Crowley said. Most of our students are quite proud and headstrong. They are so self-reliant and self-centered that they never even considered cooperating with others. I'd heard that too, he responded after a moment. This was the point the ghost had pressed upon him, but given that the person in charge of the institution was saying the same thing, he realized the issue must be more serious than he imagined. Sniffling, Crowley tentatively patted Yuya's shoulder. You possess no magic, yet, despite that, or perhaps because of it, you were able to convince those who can use magic to work together for a common goal. I'm certain that you are a vital resource for this school. My educator's intuition tells me so. He fell silent then, the eyes that peeked out from behind his mask firmly focused on Yuya. Head mage? He had no idea what Crowley was thinking. I've made my decision, the head mage said finally, in a quiet voice. Trapola, Spade, you have found a magnificent mage stone that is perfect for the chandelier. As promised, I hereby revoke your pending expulsions. Yes! Deuce pumped his fist into the air. I get to stay at school! Natch, I knew it'd all work out. Ace put his hands on his hips and shook his head in exasperated satisfaction. Happiness crept onto his face as it slackened into a smile. Crowley turned towards Yuya. Furthermore, you... Yes, sir. He stood a little taller. I am granting you the qualifications necessary to attend school at Night Raven College. What? As an actual student? He had to have misheard that, but Crowley's smile remained firm. A student? Really? You mean I don't have to be a janitor anymore? Yes. Did I not just tell you that you are exactly what we need at this academy? Thus, we must offer you an appropriate welcome. It is extraordinarily kind of me. Of course, he concluded enthusiastically. Yuya looked towards Grim. The small monster was standing alone off to the side. His drooping ears shadowed his face, hiding his expression from Yuya, but his rounded back seemed wretched somehow. Yuya was about to call out to him when Crowley's gold fingernail snapped at his nose. Halt this instant. There is, however, one condition for your admission. A condition? Yuya's heart sank. Not to keep harping on the fact, but your inability to use magic is, for a mage, unacceptable. You would not be able to adequately pursue the school's curriculum, not to mention perform the basic tasks of daily life. He sniffed. To that end, Grim. Huh? Grim lifted his face and Crowley met his eyes. You and you will be permitted to enter Night Raven College as one joint student, the head mage told him. One joint student? Yuya's heart leapt back up. You mean I can attend the school too? Grim asked, stunned. Basically, yeah, Ace said. Probably? Deuce agreed. Grim's face lit up as he raced over to Yuya. He climbed up on Yuya's shoulder and used them as a podium to lock eyes with Crowley. I can be a Night Raven College student? Yes. Really? Really? Really, really? You are persistent. If you must have proof, here. Crowley waved his staff, and small particles of light rained down on Grim. Glittering, they came together in soft threads and gently stroked the white fur of his neck. The light concentrated around his torso, bounced back, and disappeared. There, in place of your magical pen, I suspect your paws cannot handle the implement. Ah, sweet! A mage stone just for me? One of the particles of light cleared away. A pale purple stone hung from a ribbon around Grim's neck. The color was different, but it was the same size as the stones in Ace and Deuce's magical pens. A badge of studenthood at Night Raven College. All right, I look awesome, you! Grim danced about in delight. Check it out, my very own mage stone. That's great, Grim. Yuya pulled the monster down from his shoulders. He'd spent a mere 2 days with Grim, and he couldn't say that the monster had been anything close to friendly or cooperative. He'd attacked Yuya the second they met and was selfish and quick to pick a fight. Even 2 days were enough for Yuya to see that Grim was the type of troublemaker that he normally tried to stay away from. At the same time, he was painfully aware of how badly Grim wanted to be a sorcerer. There was nothing Yuya was devoted to in the same way, and perhaps that was why just seeing Grim rejoicing made his own heart sing. "Congratulations," he said, and really meant it. Grim grinned with all his teeth. Smiles appeared on Ace and Deuce's faces as well. "Pretty great, huh, you?" Deuce said happily. "And you too, Grim." Perhaps not hearing him, or perhaps simply ignoring him, Grim kept humming to himself, lost in the ecstatic daydreams. "I am amazing! The best of the best! The cream of the crop! I'll be a great mage in no time flat!" "Hey," Ace whispered in Yuya's ear. "Is he okay?" Deuce asked. "Probably," Yuya replied. But Deuce looked dubious. Yuya knew how he felt. "Stay strong," Ace slapped his back. "The two of you are one person now. You gotta keep a tight rein on that Grim, you know?" Two as one. They were in this together. If Grim stirred up trouble again, they might face expulsion. Oh, rest assured on that point. I have thought that through. Here, you. For you. The head mage held out his small camera. This is a ghost camera. It's an old magical artifact able to capture parts of the subject's soul. Oh, I forgot that it could do that? I thought it was just a camera that could take pictures, but no. It's an old magical artifact able to capture parts of the subject's soul. I would like you to photograph Grim and the other students with this camera, make a record of your campus life, and report back to me. So we're just stealing little itty-bitty bits of people's souls. Okay. Okay. The head mage glanced at Grim. He was dancing around, waving his fists, tail swishing back and forth. It's all fine and good to be in high spirits, but I'd ask that you please report to me immediately when his high spirits reach new heights and lead to mischief. I understand. Yuya nodded firmly. Now then, Crowley cleared his throat. The hour has grown late, so further details shall have to wait till the morrow. You are all dismissed. Return to your dorms. Good night, sir. The students thanked Crowley and left the headmage's office. Ace let out a big yawn. The headmage was right. I'm seriously wiped. Come on, Deuce. Let's head back to the dorm. Yeah, I'm exhausted, Deuce agreed. I'm going straight to bed. Yuya called out as they started to walk away. Thanks for everything today. Ace and Deuce looked back at the same time and grinned. We're classmates starting tomorrow, Deuce waved. See you then. You've got this, you. That was perhaps the first time Ace had called him by name. Yuya stared absently as they headed off, and Grim jabbed him in the shin. Hey, you! Time for us to book it too. Back to Ramshackle Dorm. Apparently, the name Ramshackle Dorm had stuck, but Grim didn't seem particularly bothered by it anymore. Bursting with happiness, he yanked Yuya's hand. We gotta hurry up and go to bed. I mean, we're not janitors no more. Tomorrow, we'll finally. He jumped up and down and the mage-stone around his neck glittered. We're finally starting a new dazzling life as students at Night Raven College. And that, my dear viewers, concludes part 1 of the novel. Wow, so glad. I am so terrified of the ghost camera now. It's a little spooky. It's a little spooky to me. I had no idea that it took people's souls, parts of people's souls. I just thought that it was fancy enough to be able to capture ghosts. I didn't think it needed to take souls to do that. But apparently it does. My oh my. So the book itself is 2 parts. There's part 1 and then part 2. And that is it. So we are now in the second half and the final half, in a way. But yes, technically speaking, we did get the prologue portion of the game done. So now we are really and truly into book 1. Or at least we're going to start to do that. Oh, a ghost soul. Well, yeah, ghosts are kind of a soul. That is fair enough. Oh, your theory is that the groovy pictures are taken by the ghost camera? That would be really fun. That'd be super fun. Alrighty. Well, shall we continue on to chapter 8? The morning classroom was bustling, yet another similarity Yuya had found between his world and this world. Yuya and Grim sat to one side of the large classroom as their fellow students whispered amongst themselves. Hey, check it out, said one student. Isn't that the guy from orientation? And the monster that tried to burn everything down? I thought they tossed him out, said another. You didn't hear? So, after school yesterday in the cafeteria... Yeah, they can't take their eyes off of me, Grim laughed. Tough being a star, huh? Yuya was hanging his head, feeling extremely awkward when he heard a familiar voice. Think again, man. Huh? Yuya jerked his face up and saw the heart and spade suits looking back at him. Well, if it isn't Ace and Deuce. Grim looked at the boys in their seats ahead of them dubiously. How come you guys are here? Could ask you the same thing, Ace said. Does this mean you're in our class? So then, Yuya frowned. Me and Ace are in Class A. Guess we're all together, huh? Deuce patted Yuya's shoulder. You'll be fine. You're just nervous about your first day, right? Yesterday was basically nothing but introductions and explanations. I'm sure you won't have any trouble, even though you're starting a day late. Deuce, Ace glared at him. How about you quit with the little good boy act and, if you ask... as if you're the class leader or something. I mean, you're actually an idiot. Ace, let him have this for 2 seconds. Oh, no. Who are you calling an idiot? Deuce snarled. You, Hal. You come to me if you need anything. Don't ask this knucklehead, or you'll end up with your neck in trouble. I can't handle another mind monster. Oh, okay. Yuya felt even more awkward and nervous with Ace and talking and Deuce smiling at him. He was grateful to them. After all, they'd saved his life, and he was only here at Night Raven College as a student thanks to their help. If he'd gone after the Mage Stone by himself, he'd be lying in a ditch somewhere right about now. He doesn't need you. So long as he's got me, everything will be peachy perfect, Grim informed them with a huff. Big talk for a weasel, Ace retorted. Yuya really had no idea how he was supposed to have a casual conversation with these people. He hadn't joined in the morning small talk among his classmates in his original world either. Offering up a non-committal reply to a question was one thing, but the lighthearted back and forth he'd heard around him was too difficult to participate in. He'd spent his whole life avoiding anything to do with anyone, and when it came to Ace, he was honestly still a little scared of him. If Yuya answered him sincerely, Ace might laugh and tell Yuya not to take him so seriously, as he had when they first met. After agonizing over it for a second, Yuya bowed his head. Thanks. His smile might have been a little awkward, but it was the best he could do. It's great to be in the same class. Ace opened his mouth like he had something else to say, but the clatter of the classroom door opening made him turn around and face forward. Morning, little puppies. A man came to stand in front of the podium, the hard soles of his shoes clacking against the floor. His coat was spectacular, voluminous, and eye-catching, with alternating black and white panels. Shiny red gloves covered his hands, and his hair was pulled back, half white, half black. His shoes were perfectly polished right down to the tip, with not a stain on them. The man waved his teacher's pointer, and the class fell silent. He spotted Yuya and Grim near the back of the classroom and nodded. I see some new faces here. The other students whirled their heads around to look for themselves. No doubt some of you have already noticed, the man said, but we have, two new puppies joining the pack. Now, newcomers, be polite and say hello to the class. Grim leapt on the top of his desk. My name is Grim. I'm gonna be a super genius sorcerer. Yuya Kuroki. You. It's nice to meet you, Yuya stammered. You, Grim, my name is Divis Kurel. I am your homeroom teacher. You may call me Professor Kurel. The flashy guy is a teacher? Unable to tell whether this imposing introduction was a joke or not, Yuya nodded his head regardless. Kurel looked over the class and smiled, his lips thin. Listen, beat this into the little heads of yours. They may not be your run-of-the-mill puppies, but the head mage has personally welcomed them into our ranks. They are students equal to every other one of you here. You will refrain from any tiresome quarreling. Understood? Yes, sir, the students replied energetically. Good boys. In contrast to the words he spoke, the look on Kurel's face did not soften. The sharp eyeliner around his eyes highlighted the narrowing of his gaze as he further scrutinized the students. He likely understood only too well from previous experience that the boys of this age were not about to heed a single word from any adult. The eyes around Yuya were powerfully curious and inquisitive, focusing on him in the same way a pack of dogs with nothing to do might look at a mouse released into their midst. He felt not just ordinary, but as though he were surrounded by creatures of an entirely different species. The gazes that bore through him seemed to be very eloquently inform him of exactly what his classmates thought of him. You're not one of us. I'm beat. Yuya stretched out in his chair. Morning classes were over, and it was finally time for lunch. Yuya and Grim followed the river of students streaming towards the cafeteria and copied what everyone else did to get some lunch. He didn't love that the cafeteria ghosts pointed and yelled, "The chandelier!" at them, but he had no complaints about the tasty food. Oh man, could you imagine? You're like, oh gosh, thank goodness that this is over and I never have to talk about it again. And then all of the ghosts in the cafeteria are like, you did this. It was you. Like, man, can't I just get some risotto? I'll even take some toast, you know? Oh man. Ay, ay, ay. Oh, this sounds really good. He brought a bite of shepherd's pie to his mouth, and the fragrance of grilled potato and the umami of meat spread out across his tongue. The cafeteria at Night Raven College had a basic menu that was free for all students and charged for any changes or additions to the main dishes. There were several options for the basic daily special, and given that Yuya had limited financial aid from the head mage, this was really a blessing. Hey, you, Grim asked from where he sat next to him. You're gonna eat that or what? Yuya's fork had become impossibly heavy. The rest of the students gathered in the large dining hall were sneaking glances at him and whispering to each other. He didn't have to strain his ears to know what they were saying. Oceanology that morning had been a disaster. He hadn't understood 90% of the words coming out of Corell's mouth. The textbook's table of contents listed plants, fungi, and medicinal herbs, and he felt like the curriculum was similar to that of a science subject he'd previously taken, like biology. Most of the names were totally unfamiliar to him, however, and while he had been able to read the words on the page, he had no idea what they meant. The class was also quite advanced. After a cursory reading, he kept encountering one impossible thing after another. Things he knew did not exist in his world. A plant that shrieks when pulled out by the root. A transparent mushroom that only grows in places with high magic concentrations. He had been too busy being surprised to do any true learning. The other students didn't know what to do with the baffled and bewildered Yuya. All of them looked at him with fascination, but whenever he turned his head their way, they averted their gaze like bugs scattering. They seemed to be handling him delicately, which made it hard for him to ask them for help. Grim should have been his only remaining shred of hope, a guide to this world. But he knew about as much as Yuya, or maybe even a little less. They were doomed. If you're not gonna eat it, I'll be happy to take it off your hands. Grim reached for Yuya's plate. I'm gonna eat it. Yuya yanked his plate back just as someone approached from the other side of the table and stopped in front of them. It was Deuce with a tray in his hands. I'm sitting, he announced. Oh, Yuya nodded. Sure, go ahead. Deuce sat down in the chair opposite him and picked up his fork. Phew, this place is packed. I was worried I wouldn't be able to find a seat. Yuya looked to his left and to his right. Empty chairs on both sides. Students filled the cafeteria, and yet the area around Yuya and Grim was pointedly deserted. It was almost funny how desperately everyone was avoiding them. So, like, it doesn't bother you? Yuya asked timidly. Rather than the murmurs subsiding with Deuce's arrival at their table, they only grew louder, with the majority of spectators now wondering who Deuce was. Doesn't what bother me? Deuce looked up at him curiously, his cheeks stuffed with food. But I mean, Yuya looked around the hall pointedly. Deuce followed Yuya's gaze, apparently only just now noticing the commotion. He finally nodded. Oh, those guys? Now that you mention it, they do keep looking over here, huh? No, I don't really care. He was fairly relaxed, almost an entirely different person from the boy panicking over his magic before, and he barely registered the going-ons around them. This was no doubt the real Deuce. It wasn't so much maturity as it was an unusual amount of nerve. Yuya's concern that Deuce might be bothered by any of this appeared to be entirely unwarranted. You really take all this stuff in stride, huh? Yuya said. I'm impressed. You think? I'm just regular, though, Deuce said nonchalantly, as he cut a large chunk off the pie on his plate and brought it to his mouth. He chewed with his mouth open, devouring the pie with obvious gusto, as if competing with Grim. It would be so much easier if Yuya could be like that too. Life would be so much more manageable if he could simply not care about what other people thought, the way Deuce did. He took a sip of water to wash down the pie. Just thinking about the afternoon classes that lay ahead, he was so jealous of Deuce's and Grim's boldness that he could hardly stand it. I And completely exhausted, Yuya collapsed onto the bed at Ramshackle Dorm after he had mustered up the last of his strength to take a shower. He had reached his limit. I don't want to do anything else today. The afternoon's flight class had been for practicing flying on brooms, which the magicless Yuya could not participate in. He could have sat out on the sidelines and watched everyone else, but the teacher Vargas had told him he would have to make up for his lack of magic with muscles, and forced him to do sit-ups for the entire period. I would have died. I would have gotten like maybe 2 minutes. Maybe. But a whole, like, I'm assuming it's like a 30 to 45 minute class period. I'm not doing sit-ups for that entire time. I'm dead. I can't do that. Oh, no. Vargas was a very muscular man and looked very much the part of a gym teacher. His tightly coiffed hair and goatee were very dashing. Check out these pecs. He struck a pose to show off his chest, and his red track jacket threatened to split from his flexed muscles. Folks are obsessed with me because, as you can see, I'm jacked. Build up those muscles, kid. They'll get rid of everything that ails you. Oh no. He told Yuya he would come up with a special training regimen just for him before the next flight class. See, that I wouldn't mind quite as much if you had like a... Because you have to kind of rotate exercises, right? To be able to do all the... Oh, again. Man. My. Very sad that they keep stopping like this. Okay, hopefully that'll sort itself and it'll be back. But man, you know, I wouldn't mind the personalized fitness plan. That seems pretty cool to me. But like I don't know, man. I don't know. The whole like 45 minutes of just sit-ups and whatever, like that just no thank you. No thank you at all. Not for me. Oh yeah, it could be an hour period too. I don't know what the schedule's like. I don't know if it's in parts or not. But I suppose it could be. Any way you wanna... Any way you want it, that's the way you need it. Any way you want it. Do. Okay, is it gonna work? Subtitles, please. Please come back. Pretty please. Oh, I would love it if you came back. Oh, there... Nope, that's not it. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Fantastic. Okay. Alrighty. Oh, my. Okay. Where was I? Oh, muscles. Everything that ails you. Perfect. Oh, never mind. Okay, anyway. Look. He told Yuya he would come up with a special training regimen just for him before the next flight class. Yuya was grateful for his consideration, but he'd been so out of breath he hadn't been able to respond. It wasn't just his brain that was overwhelmed anymore. His body was also weak with exhaustion. I ain't moving from this spot, Grim groaned. Yuya had only watched the class, but the whole flying thing had looked pretty hard too. Grim had bounced up and fallen from his broom more than once, and now he was stretched out in the bed, just as wiped out as Yuya was. While they were at school, the ghost had put together a bed for them. The mattress was new and the scent of laundry detergent wafted from the white sheets. It was big enough for him and Grim, with room to spare. He couldn't have asked for a better present to celebrate their admission to the school. First period tomorrow's History of Magic, Yuya said. Okay, so they are on a rotating schedule. If they had Potionology first today and they're going to have History of Magic first tomorrow, they're on a rotating schedule, which I assume means that their classes are much longer which means that I would have been so dead from like an hour, hour and a half of having to deal with Vargas. No thanks. No thanks. Ha, Grim sighed. I want a class where I can show off my amazing magic. I don't care what the class is so long as it's easy. But history? He could easily picture how difficult the class was going to be for him, considering he had come from an entirely different world. No doubt he'd be just as exhausted again tomorrow night. Was he going to have to live like this forever from this point on? Feeling like he had nowhere to go, no purpose, no home to return to, and just aimlessly wandering through life? The more he thought about it, the gloomier he became. Let's just go to sleep. Good night, Grim. Yuya fell so quickly into a deep, deep slumber that he never knew if Grim said anything in response. And here we have our dream sequence. We have little Miss Alice in Wonderland talking to the Ace of Clovers and another card that I cannot see the suit of, but they're painting roses in the rose maze. Cards! Hurry up and paint those roses red. Slather them quickly as foresaid. Ace of Clubs, hurry, hurry! There are still roses left to paint. They're painting roses? Alice, why are you painting these white roses red? Cards, huh? 2 of Clubs. Why, you ask? It's quite simple. We planted the wrong color, you see. Ace of Clubs. The Queen likes her roses reds. If they're white, we'll lose our heads. Ace. Alice. Goodness. 3 of Clubs. And so, we're painting the roses red. And that is the end of our dream sequence. The world changes abruptly. Bang, 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 bang. The noise echoed through the room. At first, Yuya wondered if the ghosts were up to something. But then he heard, "Open up!" in a voice that was too high to be theirs. Someone was knocking on the dorm's front door. He opened his eyes a crack and saw through the curtainless window that it was pitch black outside. Still night. He moved his sluggish mouth with a difficulty. Someone's here? Yeah, who? In the middle of the night? Go away, Grim grumbled as he yanked the blankets over his head. Ignore him. Not here. Yuya followed suit and closed his eyes again. Unfortunately, not only did the knocking not stop, but it also grew more insistent, more frequent. He and Grim poked at each other and squabbled about who would go check it out, until they were both more or less awake. In the end, they decided they would both go and answer the door. Quit it, jeez, Grim howled. Who's there? You got any idea what time it is? The banging only stopped when they turned on the light in the entryway. Who is it? Yuya asked. Head mage? It's me, Ace, said a voice through the door. Huh? Ace? He and Grim exchanged a look at the unexpected visitor. What's up? It's late. Yuya opened the door. It really was Ace, and he looked extremely unhappy. While Yuya and Grim were in their pajamas, he was still in his school uniform. But Yuya's eyes were drawn to one thing in particular. What do we think it's going to be, guys? What do you think that one thing in particular is going to be on Ace's personage at this time of night on this day of days? I wonder what it could be. I wonder. Y'all think it might be the collar? Y'all think it might be the collar? I wonder. Let's see. The large, very obvious, black and red collar around Ace's neck. Hey, congrats, guys. You got it. What? Grim cried out when he noticed it. The collar was the same as the one Riddle had shackled Grim with at orientation. They stared, stunned. "I am never going back to Heartslabyul dorm," Ace shouted, trembling with rage. "I'm joining your dorm for good." In the days after orientation, new students could be seen wandering around the sprawling campus grounds, hopelessly lost. At Night Raven College, ghosts holding up wayfinding signs were as much a sign of fall as the changing leaves on the trees. The layout of the school was confusing, to say the least. After spending some time as lost a lamb himself, Ace had finally stepped up into the kitchenette at Heartslabyul, and the tension slid right out of his shoulders. In the supposedly short trip from his room, he'd taken a wrong turn 3 times. Outside on campus was one thing. He was good at dealing with things on the fly, and he'd always had a pretty good memory. He already had the entire map of the large campus neatly tucked away in his head. And yet, his own dorm had him at his wit's end, with so many unnecessarily complicated twists and turns. Doors too tiny for anyone to actually use, windows that opened into walls, and an overall design sensibility that could best be described as dizzying. Getting lost was almost an inevitability. I'm starving," he said to himself. "I need food." Unfortunately, the fruit basket on the table was empty. R.I.P. He should have seen that coming since it was already late, but he couldn't give up his quest, so he began to rummage through the cupboards. He hadn't been able to focus during lunch and then again at dinner, so he'd barely tasted his food. With the entire student body keeping Yuya and Grim at arm's length, Ace had spent time deliberating whether he should say hi or if it was better to ignore them. But then Deuce had plonked himself down at their table, and other people had started talking to Ace. And before he knew it, dinner time was over. Ace was, if nothing else, a growing boy, and the food he'd absently gulped down had been digested hours ago, so now his empty stomach ached. He opened the fridge and something delicious caught his eye. A large tart. 3 of them, in fact, taking up a significant amount of shelf space. Whoa, score, tarts? Those look amazing! He took one out of the fridge and gently lifted the glass lid. Since each of the 3 tarts were in their own pans, and there was no sign of a box like the ones the bakeries provided for cakes, he had to assume they were homemade. But they did not look homemade at all. The tightly packed berries were glazed with nappage that made them sparkle like gemstones. Irresistibly drawn to the tart, he brought it closer to his nose, and the sweet, buttery scent practically short-circuited his brain. There's plenty to go around and all. No one would notice if I snagged one teensy little slice, right? He hesitated a moment before extracting a slice of the beautiful round tart. But desserts exist to be eaten, and this was the dorm fridge, so the tarts had to have been put there for the dorm residents. He looked around and grinned. Even if that weren't the case, he would just apologize when his crime came to light. Lifting the slice up to his mouth, he took a huge bite. Instantly, the fragrant dough, the lightness of the cream, and the sour, sweet taste of the fruit filled his mouth. And the subtitles have decided to leave us once again. How unfortunate. If they stop one more time, I'm just gonna give up on them. Because at this point, this is so annoying. And it's stopping the flow of my reading, and then I can't remember where I'm at. And it's very sad. Next time they disappear, they're just gonna disappear for good. I'm so sorry, but like, this is very, very silly. Anyway, where was he? He was eating the cake, using the cake. The slice was bigger than his hand, but he still polished it off in 3 bites flat. So good, he declared. I'm in pastry paradise right now. Of course they're good, came a voice in reply. Trey made them. His tarts are always exceptional. So they are homemade. I can't even believe how good this... Ace froze. Ever so timidly, he looked over his shoulder to see the hair redder than the strawberries he'd just eaten. Housewarden? Riddle was standing imposingly in the doorway, his arms crossed and slate gray eyes burning with anger. Ace shuddered in fear. The Queen of Hearts Rule 89 is quite clear. Never eat a tart without the Queen's express permission. Oh, this is, Ace stammered. Not that. Are you sure about that, buddy? Are you sure about that? How do you know this is not that, huh? Oh, I will not hear excuses, Riddle cried. How dare you touch what is mine? The theft of tarts is a serious crime. This was yours? Ace panicked, and Riddle waved his magical pen. Off with your head. Oh my. And here I am. Ace finished his explanation from his seat on the lounge sofa. And Yuya and Grim exchanged looks, at a loss for words. Ace grew even sulkier. What? What's with that look? Think about it, man. You don't think it's over the top for my magic to get sealed away for eating one slice of tart? For a mage, that's like having your arms and legs bound and shackled. Come on, you know this is messed up. I mean, you're both kind of terrible, Grim noted. There were 3 whole tarts. 3, Ace protested. It's not like he couldn't eat them all by himself. I'd go ballistic if you snuck even a single bite off me, Grim sniffed. No matter where you ran, I'd hunt you down and make you pay. Well, maybe you would. Ace turned to a silent Yuya. What about you? Me? Yuya was suddenly flustered. Rack that brain of yours, man, Ace told him. Remember all that stuff Riddle said to you at orientation? You think he's a tyrant, right? Yuya felt like picking a side would only lead to conflict, so he avoided the question entirely. I don't know, he said finally. For real? Ace's shoulders slumped in disappointment. So no one's got my back here? Why were you so hungry anyway? Yuya asked. Did you miss supper or something? I had supper. It just wasn't enough, Ace said angrily. It seemed like there were no extenuating circumstances to consider. But, like, maybe Riddle would forgive you if you apologized? Yuya wondered. Ace looked up at him. You think? Uh-huh, Yuya nodded. If you really mean it, absolutely. He thought back to the glimpse he'd gotten of Riddle at orientation. Anger that made Yuya's hair stand on end. A beet red face like bubbling magma, and a stubborn, strong-willed tone. It would no doubt take some work to get him to let this go. But that didn't mean it was impossible. Ace gave up. Fine, I'll apologize to him tomorrow. Great, Yuya smiled. So anyway, let me crash here tonight, Ace continued. Huh? Grim said. Why should we? No way. Jeez, dude, Ace rolled his eyes. You gotta let me stay. The skies have been all, wow, the chandelier and blah, blah, blah as a Heartslabyul student. That's right. Oh, that's right. He's definitely getting scolded for literally everything else that he's done. I kind of forgot about that. I can't go crawling back now after running out like that. He leaned forward abruptly and clapped his hands together. Please. He raised eyebrows up high on his head, making his eyes rounder, like a pleading puppy dog's. He clearly knew how to work the cute angle. He was cunning and pushy, but in a way that made him sympathetic and likable. He cocked his head to one side. Come on, there's no one here but you guys anyway, right? This place is so big, and it's just from one night. I promise I'll pay you back later. Fine, Grim agreed with a scowl. You can crash, but it'll cost you 10 cans of tuna. You've got a deal, Ace grinned. The ghost slipped through the wall and flew around in delight. Ooh, a friend, one chirped. Never thought we'd see folks living it up in Ramshackle Dorm again, said another. Shut up and quit jumping out of the walls. Grim waved his paws in the air as if he were swatting at flies. Yuya watched as the unusual game of tag with the ghost began. Hey, Ace said abruptly, a complicated look in his face. Huh? Yuya took his eyes off the chase. Sorry, what is it, Ace? Are you still mad? He mumbled. Yuya blinked in confusion. About what? You know, getting off on the wrong foot, he said. When we first met in front of the statues of the Great Seven. Yuya's heart leapt in his chest. He wanted to forget about the whole thing. Ace had seemed so nice when he first started talking to them, and Yuya had been totally taken in by him until Ace had done a total 180 and started making fun of him. He'd laughed maliciously and called him a total bore. He wasn't sure what he should say. He wasn't angry, he was scared and didn't know how to interact with someone who was so straightforward. What was Ace trying to accomplish by bringing that up now? Yuya snuck a glance at him, but Ace was hanging his head, so he couldn't see his expression. He tried to puzzle out an answer, but he couldn't glean any clues. If he didn't hurry up and say something, Ace would probably get annoyed and wonder how long Yuya was going to hold a grudge. Perhaps sensing Yuya's panic, Ace muttered, sorry, still looking down. Huh? Yuya said, doubting what he had heard. Oh, come on! Ace yanked his head back up. I said I'm sorry, okay? I didn't know your whole deal, and I said some stuff that was maybe kind of mean. It's just, I heard there was this guy with no magic at the school, and I figured you had bullied your way here in or something. Like the rest of us had to work our butt off to get in, and you just sort of waltzed right in. It bugged me, all right? Like, hey, no fair. This was delivered quickly, almost in a single breath, as he fidgeted awkwardly. My bad, he glanced at Yuya. And since I apologized, you'll forgive me, yeah? Call it even? Yuya couldn't help but laugh. It was so like Ace. Yeah, he nodded. And I wasn't mad, not at all. Ace had been mean and unfair, but also entirely correct. That was why Yuya had been so scared. At last, he realized that the whole incident had been nothing more than the posturing of a boy the same age as him. Thinking back, he recognized that Ace had also been pretty nice to him, like when he had said hello to him in that very morning. And yet Yuya had been on edge, wondering if there was some kind of ulterior motive behind the simple greeting, which wasn't fair to Ace. What else would Ace think was the reason behind Yuya's fear of him? He also remembered that he'd missed his chance to say something important. I really appreciated your help yesterday. Now it was his turn to bow his head. He hadn't been able to thank Ace properly for rescuing him from the monster in a nick of time. If you hadn't been there, Ace, I don't think I'd be here right now. Appreciated? Ace snorted a laugh. This isn't some highfalutin rich kid school. You don't need to be so polite. Yuya smiled. Okay, thanks. It seemed to Yuya that Ace's cheeks were colored the slightest hint of red, making him actually look his age for once. Okay, Ace clapped his hand, so we're all clear. No hard feelings. Now I can crash here with a clean conscience. Hey, Grim closed in on Ace with a pillow from one of the ghosts. I'll tell you right now, outside of the bedroom me and you use, this entire dump is buried under a foot of dust. So if you want to crash, you better start cleaning. Is that any way to treat a guest? Ace snapped back. Just let me have this room. Use one thing, but you can basically sleep anywhere. I'm very sensitive, Grim sniffed huffily. The only place I can sleep's a bed. Liar, you were sawing some serious logs today in potionology. On your very first day? The ghost yelled at Grim. The lounge of Ramshackle Dorm was full of life, and Ace's cheerful attitude was like a sun in the moon. When he laughed, Yuya felt his own heart lifting, as if his sadness from a moment before had never been. He didn't understand anything about the world around him, but at least he was moving forward now. In which case, he might just be able to try a little harder tomorrow. With this warm thought, Yuya fell back asleep. A hoarse electronic buzz scratched at his conscience. It was the faintest of sounds, too quiet to be an alarm clock or a phone alarm. Yuya ignored it and rolled over. The zzz zzz of a broken bell turning into a bang bang of a knock, and the same sound he'd heard last night. Someone was banging on the front door of Ramshackle Dorm. Grim had shoved his head under his pillow, but he leapt up at last. He had reached his limit. "Ah, man, first thing in the morning. Who's it this time?" he growled. Yuya changed into his uniform and stepped into the hallway with Grim, where they bumped into Ace. "Morning, Ace." "Morning, you." Ace looked much better than he had earlier. They'd ended up putting him on the sofa in the lounge, but even so, it looked like he'd been able to get decent sleep. He marched toward the door and yanked it open like he was the dorm warden. "Ah, Deuce!" Ace exclaimed. "I figured I'd find you here," Deuce said, standing on the other side of the door in the still pale morning light. He peeked around Ace. "Morning, you, Grim." Then he stared at Ace in exasperation. "I heard from the other guys that you snuck a piece of the house warden's tart, and then he put a collar on you?" He snorted with laughter. "You really are an idiot." "Oh, shut up," Ace snapped, "like you're one to talk. What are you gonna do about class today? You'll be in a real pinch if you can't use magic." "Huh? Honestly? Why did you even come to an arcane academy in the first place?" Deuce teased with a grin, almost as if getting his sweet revenge for everything Ace had pulled so far. Even Grim laughed at him, saying, "The school could always use another janitor." But Ace didn't put up a fight. Perhaps he'd been thinking the same thing himself. Groaning, he glared at Deuce. "So what? You come to take a photo shot?" "Oh, a pot shots. Not a photo shoot. Pot shots. That makes more sense." "I don't have that kind of time either," Deuce told him. "I came to get you. The honor student always lends a hand to the fallen classmate, right?" "Why are you always so annoying?" Ace rolled his eyes. "And thanks, but no thanks. I was already going to say sorry." Deuce swept an arm forward invitingly. "So then let's head back to the dorm." Ace stepped outside and Yuya decided to watch them go from the entryway. Last night he hadn't been sure how things would end up, but it seemed like it was all going to work out. "What?" Ace looked back at him unhappily as Yuya stood in the doorway grinning. "Get a move on, you." "Huh?" Yuya's eyebrow shot up. "You want me to go with you?" "You were the one who said I should apologize," Ace said. "So what? You just gonna abandon me?" "That's not what I'm saying," Yuya shook his head. "It's just, do you need me? Won't you be okay by yourself, Ace?" "You're going to school anyway," Ace told him. "Two birds, one stone." He felt nervous at the idea of watching someone apologize, especially to the terrifying riddle. He would have preferred not to have anything to do with it, but with Ace persisting him, it didn't seem like he could really say no. When he begrudgingly agreed, Ace laughed. "Yeah!" Deuce cocked his head to one side as he watched this exchange curiously. "Were you guys like this yesterday too?" "Like what?" Ace demanded. "I don't know," Deuce shrugged. "You seem sort of buddy-buddy." "It's all in your head," Ace abruptly changed the subject, as if to shake Deuce off. "If we keep standing here staring off into space, class will start on us. Come on, let's go already." Yuya asked Grim what he was going to do, and the monster leapt outside, seemingly raring to go. "I'm coming. I want to see this Heartslabyul too," Grim shouted. "It's Heartslabyul," Ace poked Grim in the side. "Wait till you guys see our dorm. It's gonna blow you away," Deuce said, bursting with delight. "Get ready for it." With a proud smile on his face, he turned towards Grim and Yuya and thumped his chest. Wow. Fantastic, fantastic. Alrighty, on to chapter number 9 now. Ace, Deuce, and Grim, and Yuya made their way over to the Hall of Mirrors. They didn't encounter anyone other than the ghosts out and about, likely because it was still early. The Hall of Mirrors was a small building. Yuya had seen it from the top of the stairs 2 days before. Inside, 7 mirrors faced one another in a circle. The group slipped through one decorated with cards and roses. "Wow!" Grim cried out as the scene around them changed. Even Yuya found himself murmuring, "This is amazing." The scene before his eyes was astonishingly beautiful. He inhaled deeply the fresh, verdant fragrance of the trees, the scent settling at the bottom of his lungs. He could also catch the faintest hint of sweetness in the smell belatedly, realized that it was the fragrance of roses blooming wildly around the room. "That's their Heartslabyul famed rose maze," Ace pointed at a row of beautifully trimmed hedges, which folded in on themselves and stretched so far Yuya couldn't see where they ended. "I haven't gone in yet myself. As soon as we started school, the upperclassmen told us we shouldn't go in until we've learned basic flight. They said we'd be in real trouble if we got lost, so I guess it's probably pretty huge." The hedges reached up to Yuya's shoulders and were neatly shaped into straight lines with not a twig out of place. The morning dew on the rich, lustrous, lustrous green leaves shone and sparkled, dazzling the eye. Crisp, clear sunlight poured down from above, and even the color of the sky seemed different from that of the one above Ramshackle Dorm. "Dang, this place is swank," Grim said. "This is nothing like our dumpster of a dorm." "It's almost absurd to even compare them," Yuya responded. He could see a large building up ahead on the brick path. With red walls and a castle-like exterior, it seemed different yet again from the main school building. So that was the dorm? Large, sturdy bushes bearing bright red roses in bloom lined both sides of the path. Yuya looked closely and noticed that each and every one of the bushes was pruned into the shape of a heart. "Aw yeah, I'm getting my paint on," came a voice from inside the garden. "They gotta all be red or it's off with my head." Curious, Yuya stopped abruptly. He had heard this line somewhere before, but couldn't remember its origin. As he continued pondering, the words of the owner of the voices appeared and caught sight of him. "Huh? Hold the phone," a boy with orange hair said, peering at Yuya. Their eyes met, and the boys were a green similar to the leaves of the roses surrounding them. "Ah, I knew it," the boy said, looking extremely pleased with himself. "Mr. No Magic Ham from orientation." Oh no, Mr. No Magic. I added the cam. Because, oops. Mr. No Magic from orientation. Hi, Yuya stammered. "Good morning." The boy walked over to the group, smile on his face as he pinned Ace with a look. "And you're the first year who totes destroyed the 1 billionth Hallmark chandelier. Plus, from the looks of the collar around your neck, I'd say you're also the brave soul who ate a Riddle's tart last night, huh?" I could seriously do without the list of shame. Ace's shoulders slumped, but the other boy appeared to pay this no mind as he clapped a hand on Deuce's shoulder. "Lucky me," he laughed. "You guys are the hot topic on campus, and here you are barging my door down first thing in the morning. Hey, let's get a selfie real quick for Magicam." Sure," Yuya stared, baffled. "But who are you?" "Oh, Cater Diamond. I'm a third year here at Heartslabyul. You can call me Cater, or KK if you're cray-cray." The words tumbled out of Cater, a boy with kind, slightly downturned eyes and a grown-up air. The top part of his orange hair was pulled back, and the tendrils of hair framing the sides of his face reinforced the gentle impression he made. Like Ace and Deuce, he had a playing card suit painted on his right cheek, a diamond. He turned the front camera on his phone towards them, crouched down, and brought his face so close to Yuya that his diamond mark almost touched his cheek. Peter was clearly not shy or afraid to get up close and personal. The unfamiliar touch of someone his own age made Yuya jump a little. "Cheese!" Cater called, and Yuya heard the click of the photo being taken. "I'll tag you on Magicam. Give me your names." Yuya assumed Magicam was some kind of social media app. Ace and Deuce introduced themselves, followed by Yuya and Grim. "Acey and Deucey, and then Yui and Grimmy, huh? Okay, posted." Peter tucked his phone into his pocket and smiled warmly. The canines peeking out from behind his upper lip gave him a face of a friendly feel. So listen, you guys came at the perfect moment, huh? It's like destiny or something. You want to help me paint some roses? Yuya wasn't the only one cocking his head to one side in confusion. Paint some roses? Yep. Peter nodded and pointed back at one of the heart-shaped bushes which bore red roses, like all the others. Huh? Deuce looked at it and frowned. Hey, check out the top. It's kind of weird. Yuya looked up and saw white roses blooming on the red rose bush for some reason. Wait, he looked more closely and saw the top half of the petals were red while the bottom half were white. It wasn't actually a red rose bush. By paint, you can't seriously mean. He stared at Cater in amazement. Is this a white rose tree? Ace was also surprised. You're painting the flowers red? Exactly. Cater bobbed his head up and down and then frowned in frustration. I've had my head tilted back at the sky since I woke up, and man, my neck is so sore. But heads are gonna roll if they don't get painted before the party tomorrow, so... He shrugged. Why bother painting them? Yuya asked, and Cater grinned like it was the most natural thing in the world. Party day roses just have to be red. They're so much more photogenic, or something. Photogenic? Deuce looked like it wasn't quite clicking for him. I don't get it. You're deliberately changing the color of these roses with magic? That's next level perfectionism. You bet it is, Cater winked. But the thing is, I also have to get these things ready for the croquet tournament. And that means coloring all the flamingos. I'm busy as a little beaver here. I'd seriously be so happy to get you guys on board. You're coloring flamingos now? Grim stared at Cater. Isn't anything the right color here? It's gotta be done 100%, Cater told him. I mean, tomorrow's our dorm's traditional unbirthday party after all. Unbirthday party? Yuya looked at Ace and Deuce, but they both shrugged and cocked their heads to one side. No clue, Ace said. Oh, whoa! Cater threw his head back in surprise. You kids haven't heard the good word? The birthday... I don't know why, but that sentence specifically, my brain just was like, Youth Pastor Cater. Y'all haven't heard the good word? Oh no. The unbirthday party's a formal high tea party, a tradition passed down through the generations at Heartslabyul. We pick a day that's not anyone's birthday and hold it whenever the mood strikes the house warden. That's a thing? Did you know about this? Ace whispered to Deuce. Nope, I was already getting this vibe, but I'm feeling pretty sure now that we got ourselves into a very weird dorm. Deuce whispered back. Cater patted them on their backs. At any rate, I need those roses to be red, like yesterday. Deucey, Grimmy, I'll show you how to do it with magic. You just follow my lead. Cater turned to Yuya. Yui, AC, since you kids can't use magic, you better stick to paint, okay? Race reluctantly accepted the can of paint from Cater, no doubt sensing the impossibility of saying no to such a persistent request from an upperclassman. Yuya also took a can and a brush and started painting the roses on one side of the path. Meanwhile, Cater used magic to change the color of one rose after another. He pointed his magical pen at a white rose, and particles of light enveloped it, then popped away like popcorn, leaving a red rose. He hummed all the while, so Yuya assumed the spell was a pretty simple one for him. It was not so easy for Deuce and Grim. When they tried to cast the spell, sometimes nothing happened, and other times the flowers changed to a color other than red. It was an uphill struggle. Yeah, it turned pink, Grim explained. Ugh, I got a green one here, Deuce groaned. Not pink, not green, not aquamarine. Cater waved a disapproving finger at them. It's rose red or nothing. Ace sulked as he ran his brush across the flower petals, grumbling. This is so annoying. If I could use magic, I'd crush Deuce at this. Dunno about that, Deuce smirked. Talk is cheap, pal. Huh? Ace glared at him. What did you say? Yeah, simmer down, you guys. Gator looked at Yuya, quietly painting the roses. Yui, you're my big guns here. Thanks. Anytime, Yuya said simply, and looked at Deuce and Grimm's failed roses. A rainbow of colors dotted the white petals, leaving them in a curious state. Using magic's pretty tough, huh? Mm-hmm, Gator nodded. That's how it is with the noobs, though. They'll be totes okay if they work on their imaginations. Imaginations? Yuya frowned. Yep, you gotta think about the nitty-gritty, you know? Like, what kind of magic are you using? What does it do? And the most important question of all, what do you want to happen? Creating a real vivid picture of all that stuff in your head makes your magic more accurate. Or if you look at it another way, you're never going to get magic to do its thing for you if you can't really picture it in your head. Oh, I get it. Yuya nodded, satisfied. You couldn't cast a spell without a specific image in mind. That's probably why Deuce hadn't been able to make his magic work in the enchanted mind. He'd been too panicked to focus on that mental image. Well, there are all kinds of other restrictions too, Gator said cryptically, and twirled his magical pen and tucked it into his pocket as soon as they got back. Before Yuya knew it, all the roses as far as the eye could see were red. Ace and Deuce had decided that rose painting was a new way for them to compete, and the work had progressed quickly after that. Good job, gang. Gator gave them air high fives. You totally saved KK's bacon. I'm beat, Grim groaned. All that standing on my tippy toes. My legs are killing me. Me too. With all that looking up at the roses, my neck's half broken. Ace hung his head, pushing down his large collar. This is seriously the worst. By the way, Gator clapped his hands to punctuate each word. AC, does the fact that you came straight here instead of going to class mean you're looking for Riddle? Oh, Ace met Yuya's eyes and pursed his lips as he nodded and admitted. I was the one who ate the tart, so, maybe that was my bad? Maybe? Maybe that was your bad? Buddy, you were the one who ate the tart. How was that a maybe? How is that a maybe? Anyway. So, maybe that was my bad? It's sort of like maybe I should say sorry or something. Look at you getting right to it, Gator cried gleefully. Did you bring an Did you bring an apology part? I can't say it. Why? Did you bring an apology tart? An apology tart? Ace's eyes widened at the unexpected words. No. I came here first thing. I got nothing. What? Gator lamented, theatrically throwing his hands up into the air. Oh, yeah, that's gonna be a problem. Total conflict with Queen of Hearts Rule 53. Stolen items must be replaced. Huh? Ace gaped at him. Rule what? Sorry, Gator shrugged apologetically. If you're not in compliance, I can't let you in. Huh? After we helped you in everything? Ace yelled. Them's the breaks, kid. All the dorm residents must obey the rules. If I let you slide, it'd be off with my head next. As if. Ace reached out to grab him, but Gator nimbly danced away. Ace, Yuya called out. Give it up. Deuce caught a hold of the hem of Ace's uniform and stopped him. You can't go flying off the handle again today, not after yesterday. Setting fire to one of the Great Seven statues, destroying a billionth hallmark chandelier. If he followed these accomplishments up with an attack on an upperclassman before the run even died down, the expulsion he just narrowly avoided might be enacted for real this time. Oh, Ace. Ace, Ace, Ace. Yuya and Deuce explained the situation to him, and Ace gritted his teeth in frustration. Do make sure you bring that tart next time, okay? We'll welcome you with open arms. Gator waved and disappeared into the dorm, while Ace stamped his feet helplessly. Oh, he knew from the second he saw me that I was totally tartless. He just wanted to make us paint the stupid roses. Gotta keep my guard up around that guy. Hang on a sec, why was I even painting roses anyway? Grim said, with a dawning awareness. Oh my. Yeah, Gator completely hoodwinked our entire group. This is why you don't do things when you're still tired in the morning. Cater was like, ah, yes, freshman. I can get something out of this. Oh, man. All I got for it was exhaustion. Ace apologized right this second. Now shut your trap, Ace snarled. Don't go using that word with me now. Yuya ignored their bickering and asked Deuce what time it was. The other boys looked at his phone and gasped. Cripes, he cried. Class is starting in like 2 minutes. We gotta get going. Yeah, we better hustle, Yuya agreed. It'll look bad if we're late. For real, that's it? I'm going to class with this collar? Ace sighed at a length while the others dragged him away, leaving Heartslabyul behind. Food! Food, food! Grim delightfully held up a tray laden with lunch. They'd managed to get through the completely incomprehensible magic of history of magic class, and it was finally time to eat. But Yuya's mind was still fixed on what happened in class. Their instructor, Moses Train, had singled Yuya out at the end of class, telling him to stay behind. Train was a distinguished middle-aged man with bits of white starting to show in his ash-gray hair. He carried around a cat named Lucius that looked like someone had smushed its face in, and he gently petted his beloved cat during class occasionally, as though seeking comment from it. When he spoke briskly about history, he had seemed quite strict, but his voice as he spoke to Yuya then was unexpectedly gentle. The head mage told me about your situation. I'm sure you must be having trouble following my class, as you are beginning with zero knowledge. Read this. Train handed him a book that was a general survey of the history of this world. Like Corell and Vargas the day before, he was dealing with the non-magical Yuya as just another student, rather than treating him as something special. Yuya appreciated this and thought all the teachers there were good people. His grades back home had never been stellar, but they hadn't been bad either. For instance, the book he'd been given might have been a thick, weighty tome, but if he put his mind into it, he could probably catch up, more or less. He began to see a light at the end of the tunnel. But he still felt a cloud of gloom hanging over him. The more pressing issue at the moment was the lunchtime that loomed before him. He recalled the previous day, the uncomfortable hour when the other students had carefully kept their distance, the almost painfully sharp glances they had shot him, the obvious whispers. If Deuce hadn't come along, he was sure he would have felt crushed under their gazes and fled the cafeteria. Would he have to endure that same awkwardness again today? The chicken sauté before him looked delicious, but his stomach hurt for a reason other than hunger. Another delicious lunch spread, Grim said as he plopped himself down on the middle of a large table, without paying the least bit of attention to the world around them. The students seated nearby quickly retreated like sparrows that had a rock thrown into their flock. Yuya nervously sat beside him. Must be nice to be you, Grim. You don't even care what all the people think about you. Other people? A daring smile rose onto his face, and Grim deftly wedged a fork in between his paw pads. Worrying about that stuff's not gonna fill my belly. This chicken in front of me is way, way more crucial. Time to eat. He dove into his lunch with a look of utter contentment, chewing with his mouth open and scattering sauce everywhere. Oh, come on. Yuya wiped the table with a napkin and accidentally met the eyes of a group seated at a table farther ahead. Their faces twisted up into sneers, and he immediately hung his head. He could hear giggles and whispered laughter mocking him. I heard that Normie already got called into Train's office, one student scoffed. For real? Guess there really is no way for a loser who can't use magic to actually be a student here, huh? Another smirked. He's ruining everything. I mean, as students of Night Raven College, we're getting lumped in with a guy like that? It's embarrassing. The cold, pointed ill will around him shot through Yuya mercilessly like barbs. However, small each individual needle might have been, they rained down on him endlessly, and it hurt, scaring him. He couldn't lift his face. He lived his whole life doing his best to avoid fights and incurring anyone's hatred. He could possibly have known how to handle having the entire school... How could he possibly have known how to handle the entire student body ridiculing him? Should he get mad at them? Should he just ignore it as stupid and pointless? The whole situation left him paralyzed. Blood drained from his limbs, leaving them numb, and his ears grew hot as if they were on fire. Just when he thought he couldn't take it anymore, someone sat down in front of him, as if to block the judgmental voices and hard eyes. He lifted his face, wondering if Deuce had come to join him again, and vivid terracotta hair leapt into the field of view. Ace! What? He said, perhaps sensing something in Yuya's gaze. But he didn't bother to wait for his reply, instead beginning to chatter. That's one pathetic look you've got on your face. And you don't actually think I'm here to save you from those guys, right? Well, let me kick that idea out of your head. I just sat here because that seat was empty. Don't go getting all googly-eyed on me. I was just walking by. No big. He picked up his spoon, but man, whispering behind someone's back without looking them straight in the face is pretty sad. For real. If you don't like a guy, come right out and make fun of him to his face. Ace very deliberately looked around and the chatter stopped, leaving silence in its wake. The only sounds that could be heard were him sipping from his spoon and Grim chewing chicken. Woohoo, this is so good! Grim had been shoveling food into his mouth in a trance, and now he swallowed loudly and patted his stomach. That pasta there looks really tasty too. Paws off, Weasel. Ace batted his paw away. You hurry up and eat. Not my fault if Grim steals your lunch. Oh, there you are. Deuce wove his way through the crowd and came to stand immediately in front of them. This place is jammed again today, huh? I couldn't decide between the carbonara or the chicken. Lost a lot of time there. He sat down next to Ace in a natural motion. Hey, whoa, Ace glared up at him. Now I have to look at your ugly mug when I'm eating too? I'm not happy about it either, Deuce told him. Actually, could you maybe just stay away from us? That collar really sticks out. People are gonna think we're rule breakers too. Oh, shut it. And anyway, the second you smash up that chandelier, you are basically a rule breaker too. The only one who says loser is the loser. Ace stuck out his tongue. No, Deuce reeled slightly. No, it's not too late. I'll show you. I'm gonna turn myself into a magnificent honor student. Ace and Deuce carried on with their usual squabbling, growing louder and causing a bigger ruckus than when they'd been whispering earlier. For once, though, Yuya didn't mind it in the least. Thanks, Ace. Deuce, he said with a shy smile. What for? Ace stared at him blankly. You're a weirdo. How come you said Ace first? Deuce protested. I'm first. Oh, no, not in alphabetical order, you're not. Yuya could still feel the sneers and stares. In fact, they seemed to grow all the worse with the assemblage of the team who had caused yesterday's chaos. But Yuya no longer felt that stabbing pain. Surprised at how easy it was to smile now, he thanked Ace and Deuce again. While the four of them proceeded with lunch, someone grabbed the chair next to Ace and asked, Mind if I sit here? Oh no, Yuya shook his head. Go ahead. The newcomer must have been pretty brave. He had short, ivy green hair and black framed glasses. A club symbol was painted on his left cheek. That mark, Yuya stared. Ace had explained to him during a break that Heartslabyul students were required to draw one of the card suits on their face. They were given a suit by the house warden after orientation. So did that mean this boy was in the same dorm as Ace and Deuce? Before he could ask, a familiar face popped up from behind the boy in glasses. You guys stick out like sore thumbs, the orange-haired boy said merrily. Saved us the trouble of looking for you. Ah, you! Ace jolted back from his chair. Good job this morning, AC, and the rest of you. Hater waved a fluttery hand. You look good. Real hot. Ace turned his face away with a sniff and twirled his fork in his spaghetti, looking bored. Real hot? Whatever. You used us and then you chased us away. Now, Cater smiled as he sat down. Don't be in such a snit. I mean, oh, KK here didn't want to chase you cutie pies away. Not really, you know. But like the scary vice house warden here, he tells me to jump. I gotta say how high. Hey, watch your mouth. The boy in glasses smiled awkwardly, while Cater put on a transparent show of weeping. Vice House Warden. Yuya asked Ace and Deuce, but they showed no signs of surprise, only nodding at the question. Nice to meet you. I'm Trey Clover. The boy in the glasses smiled at him. A third year like Cater. I'm Heartslabyl's Vice House Warden. Sorry our Ace caused you all that trouble yesterday. His voice was gentle. He had sought Yuya out to make this apology. When Yuya shrank back, he laughed and said playfully, well, I also wanted to check out the guys from that rustic dorm. Don't let your guard down, you. Ace waggled his spoon in front of him. The house warden's the one picking the vice house warden after all, you hear me? Hey, don't be rude to Clover, Deuce said, jabbing him. But Ace was clearly holding firm to his grudge over the events of that morning. Trey only lowered his eyebrows and smiled. Hey, so, Grim cutted, looking up at Trey. What even is a vice house warden? Our house warden, Trey started. All know him, right? Riddle Rosehearts? Grim and Ace both pulled sour faces. I guess you could say the vice house warden's like his assistant, although Riddle doesn't actually need an assistant. The fact that he had a title likely meant that Trey was a peacemaker among the students. Yuya felt like he understood why Deuce had looked so nervous. The Heartslabyul house warden, the vice house warden, Yuya had the sudden realization and timidly said, That reminds me, what other dorms are there besides Heartslabyul? No way! Just as he feared, Ace gaped at him. You don't even know that? Sorry, he hung his head. It's fine, all good, Cater winked at him. You're like the white rabbit. You don't know a single thing. It's totes adorbs. KK and Trey will tell you everything you need to know. So you know the statues of the Great Seven on Main Street, yeah? Our school has 7 dorms in honor of them. There's Heartslabyul, that's our dorm. Cater chanted as if he was used to... Cater chanted as he used a finger to write on the table with magic. Heartslabyul dorm, modeled after the strictness of the Queen of Hearts. Savannah Claw dorm, based on the persistence of the King of Beasts. Octavanel dorm, based on the benevolent heart of the Sea Witch. Scarabia dorm, based on the Scaravia dorm, based on the mindful personality of the Sorcerer of the Sands. Pomfiore dorm, based on the tenacity of the fairest queen. Ignihide dorm, based on the diligence of the king of the underworld. Diasomnia dorm, based on the noble spirit of the Thorn Fairy. That's all 7 of them. You saw the dark mirrored orientation, yeah? That thing looks at the essence of a new student's soul and decides which dorm best fits them. Cater blew a puff of air at a glittering letters on the table. The words scattered and disappeared like a pile of sand. Oh, I wasn't, Yuya started. All those names are way too long, Grim shouted, almost as if speaking for Yuya, and ran a paw over his ears. How's anyone supposed to remember them? Well, you get the idea, Cater laughed. Want to or not, you'll learn them soon enough. Yuya and Grim looked anxious, and Trey offered them a reassuring smile. It's okay. It's pretty easy to figure out who's in which dorm. They have different colored armbands and mage stones on their magical pens. We wear the black and red of the Queen of Hearts dress. Red and black armbands with crimson mage stones. Even if you can't tell by the colors or whatever, soon enough you'll get to who's who just from meeting them, Cater said. Each of the dorms has a totally different vibe. Right, Trey nodded. You already know about our Heartslabyul dorm. Nope, no idea, Ace spat. I mean, what even is it? Those weird rules of the Queen of Hearts or whatever, on birthday parties painting roses, make 0 sense to me. I can't believe you, Deuce hissed. How can you be so rude to upperclassmen? Okay then, Ace gave him a hard look. Are you saying you're 100% on board with that weird task, Deuce? Deuce looked troubled and glanced at Trey like he was having trouble actually saying the words. Peter watched him with amusement. You think it's weird? Deuce sent his eyes racing around the room. It's like... Your face! You're a total truth teller, Deucey. I love it. Come on, don't go teasing the new kids too much, Trey said reprovingly, and cleared his throat. Heartslabyul is an homage to the spirit of the Queen of Hearts. By tradition, our students live according to the rules that she created. And she had 810 rules in all, Cater sang. 810? Ace and Deuce cried in unison, looking at each other. And we follow them? Ace murmured. Can I even remember them all? Deuce said. Yeah, your dorm's pretty rigid, Grim pointed at them, guffawing. Now that Grim had been officially accepted as a student, he'd broken free of his longing for the other dorms. For the past day, he'd really connected with the ghosts who lived in them and had been crowing. My ramshackle dorm's the best. Yuya was just glad he accepted their shared life. No rules in ramshackle dorm, plus we've got free reign on the whole building, he boasted. When I get back there today, I'm gonna clear the second floor and make my room shine. Ace looked at him with jealous eyes. Heartslabyul is super rough. Actually, the rules are basically just an old tradition. Like, if I had to say Heartslabyl's motto, it's more of a vibe. Peter said with a bittersweet smile. How strictly we follow the traditions depends on the house warden. Plus, past wardens have been much more relaxed. Riddle, though, Trey shook his head. He doesn't mess around. He strictly enforces the Queen of Hearts rules. The real wild part about Ridley is how he gets all the dorm students to obey the super strict system, Cater noted. That doesn't make it okay for him to put this collar around my neck just for eating a slice of tart. It's not right, Ace said and drank down his glass of water. If you're talking wild, it's wild how narrow-minded and controlling he is. Huh, so I'm narrow-minded and controlling? Yep, Ace nodded emphatically, blowing right past strict straight into tyranny. Ace? Yuya tried to stop him, but he was too late. Ace looked back and froze. House warden? He leapt to his feet like someone had dumped boiling water on him. Behind him, the house warden, Riddle, Rose Hearts himself, stood with his arms crossed. Tucking his fiery red hair behind his ear, he asked, and gray eyes blinked slowly under the fan of lush eyelashes. Wow, could you imagine if your eyes were right under your eyebrows, you know? I mean, maybe Riddle does have lush eyebrows. I can't say. Anyway, the outrage that had colored Riddle's face the other day seemed like an impossibility. But as ever, his intensity belayed his slender frame. Hey, Riddle, Cater grinned. What's shaking, pal? You're looking adorbs as always. Riddle sniffed disdainfully. Cater, keep running that mouth and you'll lose it, along with the rest of your head. Sorry. Cater waved apologetic hands. My bad. Riddle turned his gaze to Yuya and Grim next. Oh, you two. Oh, hi, I'm Yuya started, only to be cut off with a dismissive wave of Riddle's hand. You and Grim, yes? I heard you'd been accepted to our school. He shook his head ruefully. What could the head mage possibly have been thinking? Tolerating rule breakers such as yourselves. Incredible. Blech. Grim stuck his tongue out, and Yuya slapped both of his hands over his mouth. Quit it, he whispered so quietly that only Grim could hear. You want to end up like that again? They glanced at the collar around Ace's neck, and its wearer gave them a painful smile. So, listen, Ace said. House warden, sir. What is it? Riddle said. Ace pursed his lips and rubbed his hands together. Any chance I could get you to remove this collar? Of course, I had intended to remove it for you. For real? Once you'd taken an opportunity to reflect on your crimes, at any rate. Riddle poked at the collar around Ace's neck. But I have not detected so much as a hint of remorse from the foolishness I've heard you spout today. So I think I'll let that stay on for a while. What? Ace cried. But I've got classes. No need to worry, Riddle waved a dismissive hand. The first term for first years is more focused on magical theory than practice. They're all foundational classes, so your inability to use magic shouldn't be a problem at all. If you know anything of shame, however, you might be slightly bothered. But I suppose that is what we call reaping what you sow. But Ace's face fell. His head looked very heavy as he slumped in disappointment. Continuing to wear this collar would be rough for him both mentally and physically. But Riddle shook his head. clearly done with that conversation. Now, if you've finished your meal, you should quit gossiping and prepare for your next class. You know what would happen if you were to break Queen of Hearts Rule 271. One must leave the table within 15 minutes of completing one's lunch. Don't you? God, so there we go with another weird rule, Ace muttered. What did you say? Riddle rebuked in a voice that could be heard at the farthest end of the cafeteria. Yes, House Warden! Ace and Deuce leapt to their feet and cried out together. Very well then. Trey, you are the Vice House Warden, Riddle said. I trust you to keep an eye on the new students' manners. Yep, Trey nodded. I'll be sure to do that. I'll be on my way then. Riddle whirled around, turning his back to them. As per the Queen of Hearts Rule 339, the post-meal beverage is to be lemon tea with 2 sugar cubes. I must go acquire the sugar cubes from the shop. His loafers echoed against the floor as he left the cafeteria. Instantly, Yuya heard sighs of relief from all around him. One student whispered, that guy is really weird. I mean, following the Queen of Hearts rules even outside of the dorm? I was so freaked. I accidentally broke the Queen of Hearts rule 186 and never eat a hamburger on Tuesday. I don't know what I would have done if he'd caught me, another worried. I get that. I wish you wouldn't come here so we could all just at least eat lunch in peace. The whispers around him were not favorable, and you realized it wasn't just Ace as a new student who was unhappy with Riddle. Plenty of the others seemed just as frustrated. People really hate that Riddle guy, Grim said, not mincing words, and Trey and Cater winced. But Riddle's for real a great mage, Cater said. With that signature spell of his, he's rock-solid pals. Not gonna be knocked off his perch by us. Signature spell? Grim frowned. What's that? Just what the name says, Trey said. It's a particular spell unique to its user. Although it's possible that more than one person can use the spell, but, well, it's rare for 2 people to have the same signature spell. His signature spell allows him to temporarily seal away the magic of another. You may have seen it in action, Cater asked wryly. It's called, Grim screwed up his face and shook his head vigorously back and forth. Off with your head. Ugh, man, the name alone is scary enough. Ace slumped down in his chair like he'd run out of steam and was just barely held up by the edge of his seat. Come on, I mean, off with your head? Simmer down already. To a mage, losing your ability to use magic is just about as painful as losing your head completely, you know? Peter said. I think it's the absolute perfect name. Yeah, definitely goes with that holier-than-thou attitude, Ace snarled somewhat rudely, given that he was talking about an upperclassman. Trey and Cater weren't angry, though. They merely smiled with slightly chastising looks. Yuya wondered if they weren't annoyed by this reckless new student, but from the way they talked, he sensed they were making excuses for Riddle. Maybe they were used to these kinds of complaints. The way the house warden was there, Ace said, I don't stand a chance of getting back into the dorm unless I bring a tart, yeah? Queen of Hearts, help me out here. Which rule was it again? Rule 53, Cater told him. Stolen items must be replaced. Riddle always looks forward to having the first slice of tart, Trey noted. And it's his right as house warden. If you take that away from him, well, you're not going to get him to forgive you until you replace not just the bite that you ate, but the entire tart. True that, Cater nodded. I mean, we're not happy about it either, but the rules are absolute. You can't really believe that, Ace yelped. Nah, this is real talk here. Cater stared at Ace surprisingly serious. Trey agreed. We would like to help you out somehow. But it's all talk, Ace scratched his cheek, looking angry, but a little apologetic too. I don't even have the money to buy a whole tart. There's no way I can replace it anytime soon. You're golden, Cater snapped his fingers, as if he'd been waiting for this very moment. I've got the perfect idea. And so concludes chapter 9. My Cater is just so bubbly, isn't he? My. Alrighty. Chapter 10. Why is this happening? Deuce muttered the second they left the school. This is just too much. He looked up with a gasp and glanced at Yuya walking beside him. Oh, I'm not complaining about Diamond or Clover, though. It's okay, I know, Yuya reassured him. He had realized Deuce held upperclassmen in serious regard after seeing how polite he was with them in the cafeteria, which was exactly why Deuce seemed unable to make heads or tails of Ace and the way he had carried on and spoken to the upperclassmen so casually. Ace is nothing but a giant headache, he complained. He has no chill, and he's always fooling around. Doesn't he have any pride as a night or even college student? Yet you're still helping him, Yuya said with a smile. Pretty nice of you, Deuce. Gator had informed them that Trey had made the delectable tart Ace had eaten. Trey's family run a pastry shop. It's the fancy word for pastry shop that I don't know how to pronounce. So his baking skills were way beyond those of the average high school student. And Riddle loved the sweets he made, so it would be vital to employ Trey's expertise. It would be a bit of work, but any ingredient the students used to cook for themselves came out of the dorm's budget, so they could make their apology tart for the price of their labor alone. Riddle was sure to forgive Ace if he brought a fantastic treat to the party the next day. When Cater was done explaining his perfect idea, Ace had agreed enthusiastically. They would begin by gathering nuts in the woods for an authentic chestnut tart. Because they had been sitting at the same table, Yuya, Deuce, and Grim had gotten roped into the plan. You're not actually going to leave me high and dry here, right? You wouldn't be so heartless. Not after we risked our lives together, yeah? Ace had pleaded. The other students couldn't refuse him, and, lured by the promise of a share of this tart, Grim went out to gather chestnuts with Ace after school, while Yuya and Deuce headed for the school shop to pick up the necessary ingredients. It was no surprise that Yuya was going along with the plan, given that it was not in his nature to stir things up. But he never imagined that Deuce would help out with the tart project. He and Ace had been squabbling basically from the moment they had met. But now, Yuya wondered if perhaps Deuce didn't actually hate Ace. After all, he was being so nice now. Yuya was already painfully aware of how this school, even the vaguest hint of someone being nice, was incredibly precious and rare, so he was even extra appreciative of it. No one's ever called me nice before. Deuce looked at him in surprise and quickly shook his head. Now I kind of feel awkward. Look, it's really great of you to say that, but the fact is, I couldn't say no in front of Diamond and Clover. I mean, you came looking for us in the cafeteria today, right? Yuya pointed out. I was really glad to see you. Maybe Deuce sitting down with them the day before had been a coincidence, but today he had been very deliberate in coming to look for them, and Yuya and Grim were glad to have him sit with them. It was no big deal. Deuce gave him an awkward smile. I figured it's the kind of thing an honor student would do. An honor student. Deuce had mentioned this concept often, almost like he had an abnormal fixation on being the quintessential normative and proper student. You were so pale the whole lunch hour yesterday, you. Since you said you came from another world, I thought maybe you couldn't eat some things here. He had apparently gotten the wrong idea about why Yuya hadn't looked unwell. Deuce beat a fist against his own chest, full of confidence. Don't worry, you don't have to hold back. It's an honor student's job to help the classmates that are in trouble. Yeah, Yuya nodded, thanks. Oh, Deuce pointed at something. Isn't that it there, what Diamond and Clover were talking about? He was gesturing to a tree with a trunk that split halfway up and the remaining branches spread out to the sides like spider legs. They'd been told this was a marker for the shop. Not far behind it stood a brick building, and a small hanging sign that read Mr. S's Mystery Shop came into view as they approached. When Yuya and Deuce opened the door, they were very quickly understood the shop's name. The interior was jammed with items with unknown purposes and applications. Bizarre masks, clouded bottles with invisible contents, and a range of vases in all sizes, as well as an ancient piano that definitely did not look like it was for sale. At last, Yuya spotted the notebooks and pencils he'd expected in a school shop, but immediately next to these were necklaces and rings that glittered under the yellow-green illumination. It was an eccentric assortment of goods to have in the middle of campus. and was charged with a mysterious atmosphere. The shop was completely silent with no sign of anyone else around. Hello? Yuya craned his neck forward and called into the shop. A creeping shadow slithered up from his feet. Ciao, my stray imps. You looking for something? Said a stylish young man as he stepped out from the gloom at the back of the shop. He was sporting a black and purple locks beneath a patched top hat, matching the description Trey had given them. This was Sam, the shopkeeper. Sam wore white gloves and a small mask brooch that looked like the other masks in the shop. Yuya felt like he met the brooch's eyes for a second and nearly jumped out of his skin. We're making, Deuce began. In stock now! Before Deuce could finish speaking, Sam pulled out paper bags and set them on the counter. When the boys looked inside, they were baffled to see the bags were already packed with the exact amounts, nothing more, nothing less, of what Trey had told them to buy. Cream, white sugar, eggs, and the rest of their required ingredients. How? Yuya asked, surprised. We didn't even tell you what we needed. Easy peasy. A little bird told me. Sam snapped his fingers, and the next instant, cards appeared wedged between his white gloved fingers. Black paper printed with the silhouette of a hat in purple, the shop's business card. I arranged for everything you little imps desire. He tucked one card into Yuya's breast pocket and placed the other in Deuce's hand, and then settled up to stand beside them. Will there be anything else? He arched an eyebrow. Might be good to have some extra cream just in case. How about the latest in mixers? Maybe a flying saucer to carry your groceries. All on sale now at a special price. No, thank you. Deuce set his money down on the counter and practically snatched up the bags with their purchases. He reached out to Yuya, who assumed Deuce was going to hand him one of the bags, but instead, Deuce grabbed his shirt and yanked him away. Thank you very much. Come on, you. Let's get going. Oh, okay. Yuya looked back at Sam as he was dragged out of the shop. Thank you. Sam's laugh had a mysterious quality to it, and he was entirely unbothered by their hurry exit. Very well, then. Until next time, my little imps. Do come again. Sam fluttered a hand in a wave at them as Yuya and Deuce left the shop. That was a close one. Deuce let out a sigh of relief. I thought he was going to charm us out of everything we had. That was some serious upselling, huh? Yuya replied, as they started back towards the cafeteria kitchen where Trey was waiting. Asa and Grim should just about be done collecting chestnuts, too. I've heard he's very convincing, Deuce warned him. Someone told me you can go in to buy a single carton of milk and you'll end up walking with 5, even though you know you can't drink them all. But when he tells you it's cheaper to buy in bulk, you just gotta go along with him for some reason. His tone had the desperate tinge of lived experience to it. Noticing the curious look on Yuya's face, Deuce blushed. The truth is, when I was little, my mom and I used to... Watch out! Distracted by the conversation with Deuce, Yuya felt something slam into his shoulder, and he suddenly found himself flat on the ground. You! Worried, Deuce crouched down beside him. Are you okay? Nothing hurt except for the hand he'd landed on. He pulled over the bag he'd dropped. Forget me, he said as he nervously opened the bag. Ah, the eggs. The crack he'd heard a second ago hadn't been his imagination. 2 of the 6 eggs were cracked. I knew it, he sighed. Sorry, Deuce, the eggs are broken. Eggs? A low voice said. They looked back to find 3 students glaring at them. Who cares about your eggs? One of the boys grabbed Yu's lapels and yanked him to his feet. What are you gonna do about my shoulder? What do you expect someone to do about your shoulder in this scenario? But anyway, Yuya said, you've got a lot of nerve running into us, one boy snarled. And then you don't even ask if we're okay? You just worry about your stupid eggs? Ouch! My arms may be broken. The third boy rubbed the arm that had apparently deliberately bumped up against Yuya, and Yuya noticed a yellow and black band around it. This boy was bigger than either him or Deuce, and given that his uniform had none of the new Christmas of Yuya's to it, he was probably an upperclassman. This'll need treatment, he grinned. Expensive treatment. But I don't have any money, Yuya protested. Well then, how are you gonna make this right? The boy loomed closer. Yuya was about to apologize when Deuce stopped him. Hold up, he said, stepping forward and grabbing the wrist of the boy holding Yuya's shirt. Please let him go. You're the ones who darted out at us from the side path, were you not? Hey, the boy said, glaring at him. What did you just say? We apologize for bumping into you, Deuce continued, but you were all fooling around and not paying attention to where you were going. Who do you think you are? Pretty big talk for a first year. The other boys took a step towards Deuce. Deuce, just leave it, Yuya begged him. Deuce frowned. They're the ones who came out at us from the side. As if to interrupt Deuce's words, one of the upperclassmen stomped on the ground. Crack! Whoops, my foot slipped! He twisted his leather shoe back and forth on the ground, right on top of the paper bag of groceries they bought at the shop. Yuya didn't have to look inside the crumpled, muddy, flattened mess to know what had become of the rest of the eggs. I was dizzy from the shock of being slammed into by a rude lower-classman. Whoa, poor babies, you're terrible! The boys laughed and slapped each other on the back. Even Yuya, who'd avoided anything to do with the fight, could tell that they were the very picture of delinquents, and he knew the safest course of action was to not fight back and run away as soon as they possibly could. Yuya fretted in silence, and Deuce's hands shook. Hey, Deuce, Yuya said quietly, let's just go. We can buy the ingredients again. Apologize, Deuce demanded in a low voice. Huh? Yuya was about to ask him to repeat what he said, but a quick glance at Deuce's face made him flinch and pull back. A blue vein was throbbing on his forehead, and his expression was twisted up in such a terrifying rage, Yuya almost doubted his eyes. I told you jerks to apologize. You got rocks in your ears or what? Completely transformed, Deuce shoved the boys who had stomped on the eggs, then lunged forward and glared at his opponent, so close that their noses were practically touching. Deuce radiated an intensity that Yuya would have previously considered unthinkable for him. It wasn't anything like Riddle's overwhelming aura, but there was a dangerous tension to him, like it was impossible to guess what he could do in the next instant. He was like a totally different person. Yuya wasn't the only one who was surprised. The upperclassman's jaws dropped in the face of Deuce's anger. You human garbage, Deuce growled. Do you know what you've done? What? One of the boys shrugged lightly. Broke some eggs? That's right! You broke those eggs! Deuce grabbed the boy's collar and yanked him closer. And those eggs, you see? They may not have gotten to be little chickies, but they were gonna make some amazing tarts. You ripped that noble life away from them, and then you grin like fools about it? Hey, hang on, chickies. Deuce, calm down. Yuya waved his arms to get his attention, but Deuce didn't so much as glance his way. He was on the warpath now. The only thing in his field of view was the enemy. 6 broken eggs, Deuce said grimly. If you don't say you're sorry, then you're getting a bruise for each one. What is with this guy all of a sudden? Another boy laughed. Like we're gonna say sorry just because you start talking like some total weirdo. Something powerful shot forward so quickly Yuya's eyes couldn't follow it. There was a thud, and the boy in front of Deuce dropped to the ground. That's one, Deuce said as he shook his fist out and looked down at the boy doubled over, clutching his stomach. This first year, he really hit him! The other two were abruptly enraged. All Yuya could do was stand there, rooted to the spot. Deuce was so still and calm that the violence before him didn't feel real. The boys were a full head taller than they were, and now they were stared down at Yuya and Deuce with fearsome glares. The one who'd taken the punch staggered to his feet and readied his magical pen. In both physique and number, the other side had the advantage. If this turned into a brawl, Yuya and Deuce would not make it out unscathed, and yet Deuce was still strangely collected for some reason. Not only was he not panicking, but he was actually stretching his neck from side to side as if they were about to get in a little bit of light exercise. Yeah, I hit him, he said. I told you I was giving you 6 shots, didn't I? What's the matter? Didn't hear me? Huh, you got some nerve, one of the upperclassmen laughed. Little first year putting his big boy pants on, standing up to his elders. You got any idea what's gonna happen to you now? Another taunted. That's my line, Deuce spat with a grin. his voice wild. I'm gonna avenge those chickies. Come at me. Forget the chickies already, you're going down. Yuya closed his eyes, bracing for the battle. Stop it, a new, lower voice said, and the world around him fell silent. When Yuya tentatively opened his eyes, a tall boy was standing there. He had an unusual air that commanded attention. Even though the fabric of his school uniform, his extremely toned muscles were obvious, and the scar over his left eye lent an intensity to his well-formed features. The upperclassmen froze, fists hanging in midair in front of their target as their bravado vanished in a flash, and they shrank into themselves like small animals under the icy gaze of a predator. Leona, one of them half said, half whispered. Zeus stared at the newcomer suspiciously, but Leona paid him no mind as he frowned down at the boys. Y'all stupid? Yours only just started and you're out here picking fights? But he started it, one of the upperclassmen protested weakly. And? Leona leveled a glare at him. You disrespected me? Of course not. We didn't mean... Leona wasn't wearing a tie or even his uniform jacket, but he was wearing a vest of the same yellow color as the three boys itching for a fight with Deuce. Faced with someone from the same dorm, the boys became quite docile. Yuya marveled at how easily controlled they were now, compared to just moments before when they had been so angry. Who was this Leona anyway? Yuya suddenly noticed the small animal ears atop Leona's long hair and remembered that he had been one of the people leading the students at orientation. Their eyes met. Hey, you, Leona said, staring at him. Yes, Yuya replied, but then quickly let out a scream. Eek! Leona had moved close to Yuya and brought his prominent nose up against Yuya's neck. Terror washed over Yuya as his throat being so hopelessly exposed to the other boy. Breaking out in a cold sweat, he was filled with fear that his throat might be ripped open in the next instant. You! Deuce raced over to him, but before his fist could land, Leona stepped away. Ha ha! Leona laughed. It's true! You don't smell like magic at all. So the whole thing at orientation was no joke. Smell? Is he one of the upperclassmen said as the boys now goggled at Yuya, like they'd only now just realized who he was. Yep. Here's the new kid who can't use magic. The one the head mage took pity on and made a student here. And y'all know what folks say if you land a hand on him. Leona glanced at Yuya and then at Deuce, a smirk crossing his lips. If you want to toy with these little mice, best do it somewhere out of the way. Hey, hang on! Deuce glared at Leona and pointed at the boys who stepped on the eggs. I don't know who you are, but these jerks still haven't apologized to the chicks. I'm gonna make them pay. When Deuce raised his fist, a skinny boy about the same height as him suddenly appeared and rushed to his side, wrapping an arm around Deuce's shoulder. His animal ears were bigger than Leona's, and he smiled broadly with large, droopy eyes, and I have just received a kitty again. Can you not jump over here, please? There we go. Who are... Yes, the new boy said placatingly, patting Deuce's shoulder. Let's have you calm down, too, okay? Who are you? Deuce demanded. My name is Heartslabyul, he shuddered deliberately, and this scary gentleman is Savannah Claw's housewarden, Leona Kingscholar. Seeing as you're picking fights with upperclassmen, it's clear I'm looking at an idiot here, but trust me, you do not stand a chance against our housewarden, okay? Times like this, you want to watch out for number one and walk away. Walk away? Deuce stared at him incredulously. They picked a fight with us. No way am I gonna run now. Goodness, Ruggy grinned. This little kitten has some real spunk to him, You should be thanking me. I called Leona out here personally, because I thought you might be in trouble, you know? You never do anything without expecting something, Leona said with a tisk at Ruggy, even though all you did was fob this mess off on me. Ruggy giggled strangely. That's our housewarden for you. I can always count on you to stop any fights in no time flat. The three boys who had gotten tangled up with Yuya and Deuce guffawed and sneered. Perhaps Leona's warning had cooled their tempers. He seemed to be pretty popular, as his housewarden title implied. When Leona turned his back to them, the long tail poking out of his pants swung lazily. With its brushy tip, the tail was not of that of a cat or a dog, but rather that of a lion. Leona let his lazy eyes slide over Yuya, and his narrow pupils shivered. Instinctively, Yuya understood that it would be pointless and heedlessly reckless to challenge this guy to a one-on-one fight. All fine and good to be so fired up, Leona said in a slow drawl, that at least have the brains to pick your battles. Haha, you tell him, House Warden, one of the upperclassmen crowed. That goes for you, dodos, too. Leona sighed and vanished, his dome mates in tow. Alone now, Yuya looked at Deuce, who silently lowered his head. Deuce, he said as he got no response. Yuya was a little hesitant to approach him after seeing Deuce's shocking transformation. He struggled to understand what had even happened until he heard a small voice. I did it, Deuce murmured. Huh? Deuce yanked his head up, a tragic look on his face. I forgot myself. I raised my hand to an upperclassman. Sorry, you. He bowed his head, seemingly to have gone back to his unusual serious self, almost as if Yuya had imagined the demon of the moment before. I must have scared you. Well, that's a way to describe it. A demon, huh? Bye. Oh, no, you saved me, and don't worry about it. Yuya tried grinning at him. But Deuce already knew how accustomed to fighting Yuya was, so it was clear he thought he'd pushed Yuya too far. He stopped inside like he was in pain. That's actually the real me. He began to speak slowly, awkwardly. I had some slip-ups at the Enchanted Mine, too, so maybe you already noticed, but when I was in middle school, I was pretty wild. What'd you call a delinquent? Delinquent? Yuya parroted unconsciously, shocked by the admission. Deuce nodded with a serious look on his face, confirming what Yuya thought he'd heard. I cut school all the time and got into fights. I hung out with a bad crowd. We used to have blast cycle races, tearing through mountain passes. From the way he spoke, Yuya figured a blast cycle was probably something like a motorcycle. From the way that oopsie. I dyed my hair too. Blonde. I was totally different person. Deuce laughed self-deprecatingly. One after another, he listed off traits of a stereotypical delinquent, admitting that to them as his own. These traits were the complete opposite of Yuya's own behavior, but he could easily imagine them. And then Deuce lowered his voice, his expression more anguished than ever, as if this were the hardest thing for him to admit. And I'd put down guys who couldn't use magic, pushed myself up by making a big show of my magic, bragged about how I was different from them. I mean, I was a garbage guy. If they had met back then, Yuya would have no doubt been Deuce's target, but seeing Deuce struggle now, before him, Yuya could tell he really regretted his past. Yuya wondered if the harsh eyes of the students in the cafeteria hadn't bothered the once wild Deuce simply because he had been used to having people stare and whisper rumors about him. But you're totally different now, Yuya said, almost as a prompt. You're sorry about all that, right? Truth is, I didn't come to that realization on my own. Deuce averted his eyes awkwardly. This is kind of pathetic, but after falling silent for a moment, he sighed deeply, like he'd resigned himself to his fate. I guess there's no point in trying to hide it now. He took another deep breath. One day, I went home for the first time in a while, and I accidentally saw my mother crying while talking to my grandma on the phone. She was saying I was so wild and that, maybe she had raised me wrong. She kept blaming herself. Yuya could see that Deuce's fist was trembling inside its black glove. He could almost sense how tightly it was clenched. It totally wasn't her fault. She didn't do anything wrong. It was all me. That's when I realized how big of an idiot I'd been. I felt like I had to make it up to her. To do better. I tried to make amends for the way I acted, all the stuff I'd done. But once you're slapped with the delinquent label, there's not much you can do, you know? Reap what you sow and all that. Deuce readily admitted. Yuya could feel how much he and Deuce regretted his past behavior. When I got accepted to the famed Night Raven College, I figured it was my chance to start over. Mom was super happy when she saw the carriage come for me, like it had some come for her personally. Uh, that, that. Where was I? Oh, like it had come for her personally. I decided right then and there that I wouldn't do anything else to make her cry. This time for sure, I'm not going to mess up. I'm going to be an honor student, someone she can be proud of. So that's what Yuya nodded to himself. No wonder Deuce had seemed weird from time to time. Yuya hadn't known him to broach the subject, but Deuce had been aware of it himself. But still, when I come up against something I can't handle, just like now, I lose control. Ah, curses. He couldn't seem to get over his own shock at having punched an upperclassman. He stared at his own fists as he muttered, "If the Savannah house warden hadn't come along, that would have turned into a real brawl. Turns out I haven't changed one bit from how hopeless I was back then." Seeing Deuce limply hang his head, Yuya thought back to when he had found him in the cafeteria on the first day of school, or the time he'd spoken to him in the classroom, and when he'd come looking for him on that second day. All of his actions, happy as they made Yuya, had maybe not come from kindness, but out of his desire to become an honor student. But that didn't matter. The fact was, Deuce had helped him out a number of times, and Yuya felt like he could count on him. Yuya hadn't said what he should have when Ace had apologized to him, and he regretted that now. If he kept on going this way, never speaking the truth because of his fear, nothing would ever change. "I'm grateful to you," Yuya said. He took a deep breath. If I'd been by myself there, they probably wouldn't have let it go even if I had apologized. Who knows what would have happened? Maybe gritting your teeth and putting up with stuff isn't what being an honor student's about. I think that speaking up and saying something bad when it's bad, the way you just did, is what an honor student would do. Nevertheless, he managed to say everything that he wanted to. Oh, nope, I skipped ahead. He was nervous speaking his opinion, but his heart leapt out around his chest as he watched Deuce's face carefully, worried that he might come off like a weirdo. Nevertheless, he had managed to say everything he wanted to. "Fighting's not good," Yuya continued, "but that's exactly why I could never stop a fight like that. I think you're amazing." "Amazing?" Deuce repeated, like he'd been caught off guard. "Yeah," he nodded. "I'm glad you're in the same class as me." "You are?" That's the first time anyone's ever said anything like that to me. Deuce blinked rapidly for a moment or two, but then eventually smiled with embarrassment. "I should thank you too. It's too bad I couldn't pay those guys back for the chick's sake at least, but I'm sure they'll rest in one piece." He looked extremely solemn. Yuya was certain of something now. He'd thought that there was no way it could actually be true, but it seemed that it was. Sorry," he said hesitantly. "Can I say just one more thing?" "Sure." Deuce straightened up with a gasp. "Of course. You have to tell me if anything's bothering you, or if there's something I need to work on to become an honor student." "Oh, it's nothing like that." This was extremely hard for Yuya to say, and now that he and Deuce had grown a little closer, he felt like he could muster up the courage to spit it out. "Those eggs were unfertilized. They were never going to be chicks." Deuce looked more surprised by this than anything else thus far. "Are you kidding me?" And that is where chapter 10 ends! The eggs! The eggs! Oh my. Wow. Poor Deuce and his little chickies. My. The revelation, the world crumbling, coming to an end. How we all feeling? How y'all holding up? How's it going? My oh my. I think I might have one more chapter in me. I might have one more chapter. Maybe. Just looking at it. You could probably do one more. Tired? Yeah, that's how I'm feeling a little bit too. But we'll do one more. We'll do one more. I feel like we can't just leave it on the egg revelation. We will not finish tonight. We will not finish tonight. This will be a 3-part series. We'll get to the next chapter, and I think, let me see how many chapters there are total. There's 17 total, and we're gonna end on 13. So that should be good. But yeah, I I will not survive doing another like 5-6 chapters. But I can do one more. Alright, y'all ready to bake a tart? 'Cause I'm assuming that's what's gonna happen in chapter 11. The air smelled sweet with the aroma of melting butter and sugar as the moist, creamy tart baked in the oven. Hands wrapped in oven mitts, Trey very carefully pulled the confection out and nodded, seemingly satisfied as he looked it over. Great, it came out perfect. Once it cools a little, we'll pile on the chestnut cream and decorate it with icing, sugar, and marron. Whatever those are. Only a little more until it's finished. What? We've still got more stuff to do. I'm wiped already. Ace sighed as he slumped over onto the counter. Ace is doing a lot of slumping today. My fingers are still stinging from peeling the chestnuts. The strainer thing was no picnic either, Grim moaned. Crushing and crushing and crushing chestnuts for the rest of time. Well, I never imagined the two of you would collect so many of them, Trey said. When Yuya and Deuce had arrived at the kitchen after a quick stop at the store to pick up more eggs, they had been greeted by an enormous bowl of chestnuts. The shells and skins had already been removed, leaving a mountain of the pale yellow nuts. Yuya was surprised. Ace and Grim had split up and collected a whole basket of them. You really went out there and did it, huh? He said admiringly. Right? Grim leaned over eagerly. And I found way more than that useless sack of skin Ace. Whatever, Ace rolled his eyes. You bawled like a little baby when the chestnut thorn stabbed into your little toe beans. Yuya was somewhat worried that this would turn into yet another argument, but despite the harsh words coming out of their mouths, they actually seemed to be getting along pretty well. Maybe the competition fueled them. He considered the idea that they might have been the potential to end up surprisingly good friends. Ace pursed his lips together unhappily. If I'd known it was going to be so hard, I would have gone shopping with you instead of sticking with Grim. That'd definitely have been more fun instead of getting stuck with all the grunt work. I don't know about that, Trey frowned as he dried his hands after washing all the dishes with an efficient, experienced air. They almost got into it with guys from Savannah Claw, you know. That was a real close call. A lot of the guys in that dorm are gym rat types, so they totally would have had the upper hand in a fight. I'm glad you're okay. Gym rats? Yuya frowned. Since they all had magic, how could Trey say that Savannah Claw would always have the upper hand, even if the other side was physically weaker? He was about to ask Trey when Trey started laughing. Haha, right. You wouldn't know. Personal fights using magic are prohibited on campus, and it makes sense if you think about it. If you had a bunch of kids going around attacking every guy who gave him side-eye, the school would have burned to the ground in 2 seconds flat, you know? A vision of the fight between Ace and Grim in front of the great 7 statues popped up in Yuya's head. Ace quietly averted his eyes. So the house warden of Savannah Claw really did save us, Yuya said. Trey frowned. This is Leona we're talking about here. He probably wanted to avoid headaches is all. If guys from his dorm gang up on first years, people are going to start pointing fingers at him since he's the house warden. Well, in any case, I'll say thanks the next time I see him. Just be careful from now on. Deuce nodded listlessly behind him. What's with you anyway? Ace demanded. You're being super quiet. You seem weird. This Leona guy freaked you out, that it? Grim guessed, shaking his head disapprovingly. Pretty pathetic, my dude. Yuya hadn't told them about Deuce's past or the eggs, so he just mumbled something vague. While they were talking, the tart had cooled down. Would you get the sieve out? Trey pointed to the cabinet behind Yuya. The cap should be in that drawer there. It's got a little hole for the chestnut cream. Yuya dug around in the drawer until he found the small silver tool. Ace groaned. You really are super good at this whole baking thing, huh, Trey? This whole time you've been moving around in here like a pro. You know exactly where everything is in the kitchen. It's like you've done this a million times before. Oh, I'm no pro, Trey protested. We've still got a long way to go. This is actually the first time I've made a chestnut tart. What, for real? Ace stared in surprise. You're totally nailing it, though. Riddle likes strawberry tarts, Trey explained, so I make those a lot. And most of the recipes basically the same. Ace scowled at the mention of Riddle's name, and Trey gave him a pained smile. This chestnut tart we're making is something Riddle's wanted for a while now, and after I found this recipe book in the library, I wanted to give it a go. He glanced at the book on the counter. But getting the chestnuts prepped is way too much work by myself. This tart's a special treat. I'm sure Riddle will be thrilled. I don't care if he likes it or not, so long as it works as an apology, Ace said grumpily. Yeah, and I'm pumped to have a piece, Grim declared. Despite Ace's and Grim's words, it was clear the tart was more than just edible. Pressed through the sieve, chestnut cream curled atop the tart, creating fluffy threads of deliciousness. Finally, they sprinkled icing sugar over it and gently placed the marrons glace. I don't know how to say the word. Okay, done, Trey said, pleased. Something smells great! Cater waltzed into the kitchen the moment the tart was declared complete. Perhaps he'd been watching things play out from some hidden corner. Ooh, looks so cute. This really shines. Let me snap a pic for Magicam. Ace blocked his way with a sour look. What, now you decide to show up? I just came to see how my little noobs were working. See, if you're fighting the goodness. He grinned. See, if you're fighting the good fight in here, and someone's gotta be the official taster, right? Whoa, taster? Grim's eyes lit up. Gimme, gimme, gimme. Yeah, Trey Oh no. Whew, lock it. Yeah. Trey sliced up the small extra tart they'd baked. When the knife touched it, the slightly warm tart crust broke gently apart. When he handed Yuya a plate, Yuya couldn't help but start drooling. The group picked up their forks as one and shoveled the delightfully warm tart into their mouths. Rich in flavor yet not too sweet. Grim pressed his cheeks and jumped up into the air. It's like chestnuts are dancing across my tongue. Is that a good thing? Trey smiled crookedly. It's really delicious, Yuya cried out. The simple sweetness of chestnuts filled his mouth, mixing in a heavenly way with the buttery crust. He felt like he could eat this forever. I've never had a tart this good. You're amazing, Trey. That's a bit much, Trey demurred, though he continued to smile happily. But thank you. Even Gloomy Deuce's eyes lit up. It's like something they'd sell in a store. Right? Cater said with a knowing grin. I told you he was scary good. Why are you all acting so smug? Deuce demanded. Clover did all the work. But I struggled too, Cater protested. Sir, Trey here looks all nice and kind, but he's a real grump, okay? Like he went and said to me with the straightest of faces, the secret ingredient in a tart is walrus brand young oyster sauce. I mean, I almost believe him and made a mess of the whole thing. That's... Deuce began before he trailed off. He was about to make a joke asking about how anyone could believe something like that, but then he remembered his own misconception about the eggs. I can't believe you believed me, Trey said as he smiled brightly. Ace and Grim glanced at him, but Trey didn't seem malicious. It was a joke. Never thought you'd fall for it. I mean, who puts oyster sauce in pastry? No. When you go telling me a perfectly serious that umami flavor of the oysters gives the cream a deep savory flavor, of course I'm going to believe it, Cater winked. Hey, Trey, speaking of jokes, do that thing. The Trey looked puzzled for a second and then nodded. Oh, that thing. You and the others craned their heads to one side, wondering what they were talking about. Trey's grin was mischievous and surprising, given how mature he'd seemed up till that point. What's you guys' favorite food? He asked. Favorite food? Ace frowned for a second. I like cherry pie. It's eggs for me, Deuce said. If I had to pick, maybe omelet rice, I guess? Canned tuna all the way, Grim cried. And the second place is cheese omelet, grilled meat, pudding. Yeah, we get it, Ace said, cutting Grim off. He looked at Yuya. What about you? Yuya was stumped. Rice, maybe? Rice? Ace repeated. If Yuya said that he liked it how it could go with anything, Deuce and Ace would roll their eyes at him, so he kept his mouth shut. Gator laughed and then said, I like a light lamb chop with Diablo sauce. All right, you've got it. Trey pulled out his magical pen, which he began waving slightly. When he said in a lower voice, as if talking to himself, white to red to white, paint the roses. Yuya and the others exclaimed in surprise as they watched glittering particles of light dance through the air. Trey pointed at their plates. Go ahead, have another bite at the tart. They picked up their forks and did as he suggested. At first, Yuya thought his tongue was broken. There was none of the rich chestnut flavor from the moment earlier. Cocking his head to the side, as he chewed, perplexed, he started to gradually taste a sweetness. The more he chewed, the more he felt a twinge in his memory at the fragrance of a grain that spread throughout his mouth. Huh? Ace also had a puzzled look on his face. It's a chestnut tart, but it tastes like cherry pie. Is this ketchup? Deuce exclaimed. It tastes like eggs and ketchup. It's only rice. Yeah, Grim cried in delight. Canned tuna and cheese omelet and grilled chicken and pudding. All the flavors are wrestling for the top spot. Apparently, everyone was tasting whatever they had said was their favorite, and there was no mistaking the flavor of rice filling Yuya's mouth. Trey and Cater both burst out laughing. A neat trick, eh? Cater said. I never get tired of asking for it. Always delicious and total blast. 10 out of 10, no notes. This is a surefire hit to liven up any dinner party. It's my signature spell, Trey said, seemingly amused at his own prank. It was a success. It's called Paint the Roses. It can overwrite characteristics like taste, color, smell, and things like that. That's serious magic, Deuce's eyes showed. No wonder you're Vice House Warden. So you're saying with that spell, I could eat the grass outside and it tastes like tuna? Gluttonous Grim looked extremely jealous. That's the best, way better than that Grump Riddle's magic. As if, Trey smiled, pained. Compared with the House Warden's magic, my spell is child's play. And it only lasts for a short time, too. It's like it covers things up for a second, hence the paint. Riddle is way more amazing. He looked up at the clock. It was almost midnight. A great deal of time had passed while they had been absorbed in the creation of chestnut tarts. It's late, he said. Let's call it a day and give the tart to the House Warden tomorrow. Tomorrow's the birthday party and all, Cater sang. Make sure you're all on time, kids. The other students turned to stare at Ace, and he crossed his arms deliberately. Can I crash with you again? He said. My mean dorm mates won't let me go back inside my dorm tonight. That's fine with me, Yuya nodded. You crash with us again, you gotta pay for the privilege, Grim said with a frown. A whole can of tuna. Come on, Ace, you said. Quit mooching off of you. You did this to yourself. You made your bed, so lie in it. Where'd that come from, man? Ace frowned unhappily before his expression flipped into a smile. Oh, I get it. You're jealous of me staying at Ramshackle Dorm, eh? What? Deuce gaped at him. No. Okay, you. Let's get wild again tonight, Ace said gleefully. There won't be any busybodies around to tell us to quit after all. Wild? Deuce was furious. You were just told tomorrow's the big birthday party. I'm okay with anything, Yuya said weakly. Don't you two start fighting again. Despite the late hour, Deuce and Ace were full of spirit and vinegar. Spit and vinegar. The two third-years shrugged in exasperation. Fine, okay, Trey said. Why don't you stay at U's dorm too, Deuce, so you can keep an eye on Ace? Huh? Ace pouted. Behind him, Deuce glanced at Yuya warily. But it's totally fine by me, Yuya responded, and Deuce's face brightened. Maybe he really did want to sleep over at Ramshackle Dorm. The thought made Yuya uncomfortable for some reason. Are you sure it's alright, Clover? Deuce asked. Mm-hmm, Trey nodded. I can't have Ace going too hard tonight and oversleeping tomorrow. As Vice House Warden, I can issue you a sleepover pass. Lucky! Cater looked at Deuce, who seemed pleased with this turn of events, and poked Trey in the arm. You're always spoiling the noobs, Trey. Maybe I'll have a sleepover at U's too. No pass for you, Trey said immediately. Wow, so quick. So quick to turn that down. The students quickly finished cleaning the kitchen and put the chestnut tart away in the fridge. All right then, don't stay up too late, Trey cautioned. Nighty night, boys, Cater said with a wave. Good night, the first years chorused as they watched Trey and Cater leave before turning on the lights in the kitchen. When they stepped outside the building, the moon was as bright as ever. I guess if you guys are so desperate to come over, I could maybe invite you to my manor, Grim told them and started walking up ahead rapidly. Be grateful. Yuya trailed behind with Ace and Deuce discussing the events of the day. Deuce grimaced at the scent of the musky air in the lounge of Ramshackle Dorm. It's as old inside as it looks outside. It's got potential, Grim sniffed indignant. With Deuce's arrival, it was clear the sofa was no longer going to work as a bed, and the lounge was too small for them to sleep on the floor. The group's only option was to move to an area that had already been tidied, so they picked up the clean cushions and carried them to Yuya's bedroom. Yuya had chosen a room so large it was almost too big for one person. The mirror above the fireplace was its most notable feature, and perhaps because the mirror reflected the light, this room seemed brighter than the others, which was why Yuya liked it. Fortunately, the mirror had not been damaged by the rain leaking through the roof, and it was neither rusted nor cracked. When he had first come across it, the glass had been clouded over, but a little polishing had easily restored its brilliant gleam. Ace looked curiously as he stepped inside. Since he'd slept in the lounge the previous night, this was the first time he was seeing Yuya's room. Huh? This isn't quite a place where a person could live yet, he commented. Hey, Deuce shot a glare at him. Don't insult you. You were the one talking about how old this place was 5 seconds after we walked through the door, Ace shot back. Pretending he couldn't hear them, Yuya spread out the cushions and blankets on the floor. The ghost flew about singing and flapping a large sheet onto the makeshift bed next to Yuya's actual bed. It was simple, but it would do as a place to sleep for a single night. Yuya climbed onto his bed and looked down at the other two boys. The room's old, but it's clean and it's pretty big. Sorry it's not an actual bed, but I hope you can put up with it for tonight. And feel free to shower or whatever now in the morning, or if you want. You need anything else? Oh, could I have one more pillow? This thing gets in the way of me sleeping. Sitting cross-legged, Ace lifted his jaw to show him the collar around his neck. It did look like it would get in the way of lying down comfortably. Right, I forgot. He apologized to the sulking Ace and handed him a pillow. I'm so used to seeing it on you. It's been 2 days. Well, technically it's been 1 full day, and we're already used to Ace in the collar. Oh no, okay. Merci. I might be able to get some sleep somehow now. Even as he spoke, Ace was arranging the pillow under his head and looking quite comfortable. As Yuya watched Ace, he realized that the collar was not only prevented Ace from using magic, but it also got in the way of him just living his life. Yuya was starting to understand how serious Riddle's signature spell really was. I had a tough time sleeping last night too, Ace said. I mean, I had to find a spot to sleep and then get myself all tucked into it. A lot of work. Maybe I'll go buy a sleeping bag and some pillows and stuff for next time. Next time? Deuce furrowed his brow. He had built a wall of cushions between himself and Ace. How long are you planning to impose on you like this, Ace? You're not actually going to weasel out of apologizing to Housewarden Rosehearts, are you? As if, Ace snorted. Not after killing myself to make that tart. It's just like, even after we go back tomorrow, I could sorta come over here whenever I get fed up with Heartslabyul, you know? Looks like they've got rooms to spare. It'd be okay for me to bring over a few things, right? It would not, Grim shouted in Yuya's ear, just as Yuya was about to say it was fine. All of the rooms are mine. Despite the fact that he had been the one to insist they pick out rooms for themselves, he's been lounging in Yuya's room for the last few days. He said it was only until the other rooms got cleaned up, but he hadn't so much as touched a broom. Yuya figured he was probably nervous about being all by himself in Ramshackle Dorm. And how exactly are you going to use all the rooms in Ramshackle Dorm? Ace demanded. New room every day, Grim replied archly. Constant rotation, so there's no extra room for you, Ace. Was it just his nature to want to make everything his? How decadent, Deuce noted with an exasperation before his tone turned serious. Ramshackle dorm might be surprisingly great, though. I could live however I wanted to. No classmates to get all in my business like a certain someone. No upperclassmen picking fights. Oh, that reminds me, Ace said suddenly. What was the house warden of Savannah Claw like, Deuce? What was he like? Deuce hesitated, and Yuya could see the awkward discomfort on his face. He was undoubtedly thinking about how he'd lost his cool and challenged the house warden, but Leona had not given him the time of day. He knew Ace would laugh and ask if he'd been in his right mind if he told him about the whole incident, but Deuce was bad at hiding things. It would have probably been only a matter of time before Ace found out about his delinquent past. Some people have animal ears and tails, right? Yuya interjected, throwing a lifeline out to Deuce. The Savannah Claw house warden was like that. He'd see plenty of students on campus besides Leona and Ruggy who didn't look entirely human, but no one seemed to give them a second thought. So Yuya had kept his questions to himself. Ears? Ace raised an eyebrow, and then nodded in understanding. Oh, you mean the beast people? Beats people? Yuya was sure that he had to be wrong. Ace stretched his arm out towards the bed and wrote beast people on the sheets. You don't have them in your world, you? No, he shook his head. Only humans go to school and talk and stuff. Humans, Ace frowned. So then do you have merfolk? Merfolk? You gaped at him. You mean outside of stories? Stories, Ace laughed. Your world really is weird, you. Here, we call everyone human. Merfolk, beastfolk, and people like us, too. Which makes so much more sense. For Sebek. That makes way more sense for Sebek now. Wow. Love the context. Oh. I was always wondering why no one, corrected him about him calling them human when they're technically like a mer person or a beast folk or, not quite human. But that makes so much more sense. Oh, so everybody's just a human. Everybody's just a human. If you're Fae, you're Fae. And if you're not Fae, you're just a human. Yeah, exactly. It's like just calling someone immortal. And the differentiator being mortal or immortal. Oh, that's so interesting. Okay. Fantastic. Oh, we love context. Oh, fun. Fun. Anyway, you do? He looked at Grim by his side. The monster turned his nose up at him. I don't give a hoot about anyone but the magnificent Grim, he told him, curtly. These people inherit the animal features of their ancestors, so a lot of them are super good at, sports and physical stuff, Ace explained. So you tend to see a lot of them in Savannah Claw, with the nature lovers and gym rats. Still, we've got some in our dorm, too. You do? Yuya paused to digest this. His name was Leona Kingscolor, right, Deuce? He seemed like a powerful guy. Yeah, Deuce nodded. He's got such an overwhelming presence. Maybe he's a lion person. I've never met one before either. The King of Beasts is one of the Great Seven and all. I heard that the Sunset Savannah is ruled by lion beast people in his honor. House Warden King Scholar also got those dorm students in line pretty quick, like a real leader. That's exactly it. Leona was obviously very strong, so as with Riddle, there was a clear line drawn between himself and the other students. It was only natural that Ruggy and Yuya would both stop in their tracks when they came face to face with someone like that, who almost dared them to run away. But at the time, Deuce's focus had been something else entirely. Deuce cleared his throat, but Ace, why are you asking about him out of the blue? Oh, I don't know, Ace shrugged. It's just that our house warden is so supremely annoying. I was wondering if there was anyone around who could stop him. Are you trying to overturn the natural order of upperclassmen and lowerclassmen? To overthrow our house warden? Deuce showered. And then Yuya heard a dull whump. Ace had thrown a cushion at Deuce. Shut your pie hole, he growled. Also, this has been bugging me forever. You keep going on about upperclassmen and order and respect. What's with all the hierarchy stuff? Huh? I mean, it's normal, right, you? Deuce glanced over at Yuya. Something's fishy with you guys. Ace eyed them suspiciously, but when Yuya nodded at him to continue, he returned to the subject at hand. Right, house wardens. All of them are seriously amazing, okay? My older brother graduated from Night Raven College, and he was always going on about how the power of the house warden was next level. Deuce and Yuya both remarked that they didn't have any older brothers, and Ace grinned. Yeah, you don't seem like the type to do. Anyway, according to my brother, all the guys with real power and anyone with ambition are gunning for the house warden title. I guess that makes sense when you think about it. Being house warden at a prestigious school is something you can brag about for the rest of your life. Plus, your future is basically guaranteed. I mean, if you can get the position, why not, you know? If you can, Deuce rolled his eyes. You make it sound so simple. But House Warden Rosehearts is only a second year, right? True, Yuya frowned. I heard that the fourth years aren't on campus because they're doing field work, but the third years are still here, right? I would have thought the most senior students would get the leadership positions. Whoa. Ace looked back and forth between Deuce and Yuya incredulously. Are you too serious here? This is Night Raven College. Power rules above all else in this place. A second year can totally be house warden if he can prove to everyone that he's stronger than they are. My brother said it happened all the time when he was here. If he can prove he's stronger, Yuya sighed. Was it possible that Night Raven College was nothing more than a den of fighting? At his old school, they'd been elections for student council positions. Maybe there was a similar way to become house warden. House Warden Rosehearts took the top spot as a second year. He must really be incredible, Deuce said, his voice charged with emotion. Trey and Cater were both freaked out by him, even though they're older, Ace snorted. I figured pitting House Warden against House Warden might be able to take him down a peg, though. But it sounds like the House Warden of Savannah Claw is a no-go there. I'd be too scared to start up a conversation with a powerful lion dude. I wish someone would make Riddle squeal already. You seriously haven't learned anything at all, Deuce shook his head. The way you're all going on about how amazing these house wardens are, you're making me want to step up and take the job too. Grim waved his paw around. Deuce laughed. There's only the two of you in Ramshackle Dorm, so that makes things easy. Although, you'd still have to get the head mage's approval, so there's that. Listen, Ace interjected. If anyone's gonna be house warden, it's you, yeah? I mean, a monster house warden, that'd be a first. What? Grim's ears twitched against Yuya's head. Well, okay, you. You and me are duking it out for the house warden throne. I'm good, Yuya smiled. I'll let you have it, Grim. Yeah, maybe you don't have that house warden vibe, you. Deuce looked over him. Oh, and you're not really a vice house warden either. What about being a prefect? Yuya frowned at the unfamiliar word. Oh, nice, yes, Ace cried, laughing. A dorm's got all kinds of jobs besides house wardens and vice house wardens. Deuce is right. You're perfect for prefect. Ramshackle Dorm needs you. Ramshackle Dorm means... Yuya paused. Wait, what does a prefect do? Keeps an eye on the other students to make sure they don't get into it, Ace told him. A slow grin spread across Yuya's face. Oh, then yeah, maybe. He laughed with the other two boys. Grim, however, appeared to not understand why they were cracking up, his tail flicking back and forth curiously. When Trey and Cater got back to the dorm, students came racing out of the lounge on the verge of tears. There were a dozen or so of them, familiar collars clamped around their necks. Vice House Warden Trey! Cater! We've been looking for you everywhere! One cried. Trey somehow managed to suppress the urge to sigh and say again. Instead, he asked what happened here. Do you remember the Queen of Hearts Rule 256? No drinking honey sweetened lemonade after 8 p.m.? We forgot about it, and in the lounge we accidentally... The boy gulped. And then the house warden Riddle took our heads. He was scary angry. Trey looked at Cater. It was hard to read his face, as he looked both exasperated and sad. Trey also had no idea what to tell the upset students who were pleading with him. I can't take it anymore, a student cried. He watches us inside the dorm, outside the dorm, everywhere. I need to be free, another begged. Everything we do violates some nonsense rule. He just keeps pushing them on us. And what do they even mean anyway? Plus, he's getting stricter about them every day. I see his angry face in my dreams. I'm half traumatized. I want to transfer to a different dorm. Whether he liked it or not, Trey couldn't overlook the red and black collars around the necks of the boys before him. They stretched out halfway across the students' shoulders. Riddle's signature spell was terrifying, not only because it sealed a person's magic, but also because the collar ripped away a student's dignity. These students had been stricken with this humiliating symbol of a mage with no magic, and the next day would undoubtedly be hard for them. It'll be okay. We'll go talk to the house warden. Trey forced a smile and patted the student's shoulders. He's probably just on edge because of the unbirthday parties tomorrow. I'm sure he'll forgive you if I explain the situation. How about you all go back to your room and wait? The students looked at each other and nodded begrudgingly. Trey let out an internal sigh of relief. Riddle would have become more angrier, slipping and completely out of control and beyond Trey's reach if they had left the dorm the way Ace had. He was glad it hadn't come to that yet. Okay, Cater winked. I'll go make some tea as a show of deference to the queen. Thanks, I appreciate it. Trey gave him a wan smile. No, happy to do it. I know you've got it rough too, Vice House Warden. Cater smiled sunnily, despite the gloomy situation. He was great at self-regulation, and it was especially welcome at times like this. Trey felt his load get a little lighter, just from seeing someone else who understood the situation, even if he knew in his heart that it wasn't exactly true. Oh, but no black tea. I'm pretty sure Rule 53 says something about drinking caffeinated tea at night. Peter's eyebrows rose for a split second, but his familiar smile was quick to return. Roger that, I'm on it. 1 pot of herbal tea coming up. Thanks, Trey said again, and after watching Cater go, he took a deep breath. What time would he get to go to bed tonight? Talking Riddle down after one of his tantrums was exhausting work. Another dream? On this spread, we have the Queen of Hearts holding a rose tree, while Alice and the card soldiers are begging on the ground. The heart card soldiers are dragging away the 2 of clubs. Queen of Hearts. For painting my roses red, someone will lose their head. The 3 of clubs. Your Majesty, if anyone's to blame, it's him. The 2 of clubs. Have mercy, your grace, it was the ace. And Queen of Hearts, so it was you. Ace of clubs. God, no, it was the 2. Then he will pay. The 2. It was the 3, I say. The Queen of Hearts. Enough of this. Off with all their heads. Ooh, yay. The 2 of diamonds. A fitting end. Color you can't mend. The 3 of spades. Everyone knows the roses should be red. And that, my friends and fellows, is the end of chapter 11. My, unbirthday party day will be coming up the next time we reconvene to read this book. But my goodness, I love how much more context the novel gives you for, like, everything. It's so nice, so nice. My, yeah, bedtime. Honestly, that last chapter with all the talk of sleeping and pillows and beds, I am now so ready to just go conk out. But this was delightful as always. I hope you all had a good time. I hope you all enjoyed. We'll definitely finish the book at some point. For sure, for sure. Yeah. There's... yeah. Yeah, translations and all that. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Oh, thank you. Who knows what my dreams will be like, but perhaps Blade will show up. I don't often dream of, characters and things. It's actually quite hard for me, even though I spend a lot of time looking and engaging with content and stuff for some reason. It doesn't go into my dreams that well. But yeah. Alrighty, well. Although this talk of sleep, if you are going to sleep, I hope that y'all have a wonderful evening and sleep and dreams and all of those things that go with dreams. Sometimes, most of the times. Anyway, if you're going to sleep, have good sleep. If it is not sleepy time for you and you are going to have a day, have a wonderful day. And I will see y'all again in another stream next week sometime. Wednesday or Friday, who's to say? But, night's blessings. See y'all again. Thank you for coming out and hanging out. And, bye-bye.